What's good, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth, to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin and is presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. That is One Pie Pizza. You can find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or on whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this podcast on. In tonight's episode, I am joined by someone who I've had on the show before, but who is no longer under the Cover One umbrella because he has moved on to some new and exciting ventures. Mr. Russell Brown, former basically head of the entire draft division here at Cover One, but now covering the Detroit Lions for Lions Wire. And also, I know you love the Lions, but you love the draft a ton. And now you're an NFL draft analyst for Fantasy Pros. I'm pumped as hell to say that for you and kind of announce that for you in case people didn't know. Major congratulations to you for just what you've done and continuing, to grind and progress and everything that you've done. So, just in case people don't know who you are, or people who do know who you are but don't know about your new venture, tell them about what you got cooking and what's on the docket for you.
Yeah, man. It's pretty surreal. I thought I had another tab open and the whole thing just went. And
I saw you pose, and I thought it was because we got two nice comments. Andrew came in and called us the dream team, which was awesome. Thank you very much, Andrew. Yeah. But then John came in and said, I love the Lions, Dan Campbell. And I thought, but one of those made you pause. And I was like, oh yeah, those are good comments.
No. I thought I got disconnected. I was like, oh, well, that's cool. We're off to a great start. But
we've had technical difficulties a lot every time you and I get together. So that would kind of be par for the course.
I think it's me. I don't know. I think I'm just bad luck. I'm just like not there with technology. Like I can clip film and I can break it down, but putting it all back together, like I hate puzzles. So maybe that's why. But no, look, man, it's been a ride. I've said that on a couple of radio shows. It's been some ride, and I don't know. We're up here, we're getting it done. And I don't know. I never thought any of this would happen. And I thought I was going to die with Cover One tatted on my chest, and that still might happen one day, but not this day. And, love everything that I've been able to accomplish at Cover One. And I'm so appreciative of you, Eric, Greg, Aaron, the whole team, and just everybody. I mean, it's been something, man. 5-6 years ago when Eric reached out to me, it was just a simple DM, and we just started talking football, and he really complimented my work. And, thanks, RJ. And it was just one of those where he complimented, we started hitting it off, and we've been buddies ever since. And, we've been, traveling the globe a little bit down to Mobile, and you got to experience that this year. And it was awesome, man. It's been a ride, man. And this is all I've ever wanted to do. And I'm getting closer and closer. And, like you said, the drafts, I'm very passionate about it, and that's a fact. I mean, you can ask my wife. I get home from the office, I plug the computer in, and I'm silent mode, and I'm just grinding. And it's a lot of time, a lot of sacrifice, but it's working out, and it's all worth it. So, to anybody that's out there that's either part of Cover One or just a premium member, or somebody that's just a fan of what we do and is somebody that works in this space or whatever, like just keep working, like the chip on my shoulder didn't grow or something, and I'm like too good to come back or talk or whatever. Like I'm still me, baby. Like I'm wearing freaking camo on a podcast. Like I do what I want. I write about what I want to write about. And the tree, Anthony and Russ.
It's a great trio.
But yeah, it's just, it's been awesome, man. I've been very fortunate and very thankful. And it's been just a humbling couple days because I announced it, and at one point I had to put my phone on DND. I had texts from random people, calls from people, DMs, and I was just like, this is way too much for me. And it's been awesome. But I'm happy to be back kind of to the roots, talking a little Bills here, but really talking drafts. So I'm happy to be here with you tonight, bro.
I think your progression and journey is a real confidence, like anchor, a marker for a lot of people, because your content is awful. And if you can continue to grow, then I think anybody can. And so It's just something like, hey, if he can do it, anyone can. No, but sincerely, your work is tremendous. So happy for you.
I'm the gold dust of this space, baby.
Yo, Goldust is an underrated wrestler though. Like Dustin Rhodes could go.
Oh, he could go. He could go.
He could go, especially like WCW Dustin Rhodes. Like even now with like what he's doing in AEW, we're gonna get too off topic if we really go down this rabbit hole. But he could go a bit.
That's why our shows go 2 hours when we're together.
That's true. That's true. Ooh, but yeah, very happy for you. And you had a mock draft that you put out for Fantasy Pros this week that is going to tie into I appreciate that's a very nice comment. Thank you very much. That ties into one of our first topics tonight. But before we dive into the content for this episode tonight, I want to, just in case folks don't know, whether you didn't read the title or didn't look into the episode description, Russ and I are going to identify several Bills positional needs going into this draft, talking about positional groupings. Then we're going to identify targets within those positional groupings from a realistic standpoint. We're not going to come in here and be like, it'd be cool if they upgraded edge. I think Will Anderson should be a target in round 1, because that's not a thing and that's not going to happen. So we're going to be identifying multiple targets from a round 1 perspective, a day 2 perspective, a day 3 perspective, across several positions of need for the Buffalo Bills, and talking about those targets in terms of 1, being available, but 2, their scheme fit, their skill set, what they offer as prospects, how they fit with the team, so on and so forth. So we're going to be diving into a bunch of players in tonight's episode, detailing a bunch of players in tonight's episode. And, we've seen the Buffalo Bills make several moves in free agency, especially on the offensive side of the ball, last week and this week. And I before we dive into the targets for this episode, I really want to get it across that I like the moves that the Bills have made. I don't think any of the moves the Bills have made necessarily mean they are out at upgrading those positions in the draft or addressing those positions in the draft. We just take Damian Harris, for example, last night. Bills signed Damian Harris, running back from the New England Patriots, which I think is a good move. He's somebody I like coming out of Bama. He's somebody who, especially if he's 2021 Damian Harris, when he's healthy, that's a really nice piece. I like that. But I don't think that means, they're definitely out on running back now in the draft. Same thing with signing Deontay Hardy and Trent Sherfield. That doesn't mean they're definitely not going wide receiver. What the Bills have done in free agency is something that they've done throughout several years under Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, which is fill depth and holes in varying areas through free agency. So that way they can go into the draft and kind of take best player available within a scope of positional need, but that way they're not too handcuffed. That way they're not too hamstrung. That's usually what they like to do. And that's what we've seen. We've seen probably the highest profile free agent signing is Connor McGovern. Everything else, and even he is kind of, no disrespect, like a lower tier, big market signing. So we've seen the Bills address several areas in trying to fill some holes, upgrade some areas, but none of those signings really mean they're completely out on those positions going into the NFL draft. But one position that is without a doubt a hole, and a position that they haven't had addressed in free agency other than losing previous long-term starter, the linebacker position. Tremaine Edmonds goes to the Chicago Bears on a very, very, very large deal. He's a happy man. We'll see how happy he is after Bears fans yell at him after one game because he's not Brian Urlacher or Mike Singletary or Dick Butkus or even Roquan. I feel so bad for him when he misses a tackle and everybody's like, should have paid Roquan. It's going to be a nightmare for him in Chicago if he's just not crushing it. But we lead with the linebacker grouping because, one, Russ, I think this is a legitimate hole on the Buffalo Bills team. Like, there's a multitude of positions that they have where it's like, they could upgrade here. They could do better than this guy, or they could add some depth. Linebacker is a legitimate hole. They are without a starter. Even if you want to hope for the best of things with Terrell Bernard, that's still just pure hope and projection. Unless maybe there's a couple people in the world who think Tyrell Dodson should be the starter. But when you're really looking at it, linebacker as a whole for this Buffalo Bills team, it looks like a position they are either going to address potentially at some point in free agency, but it really looks like for me at least, that their best options in addressing this position for 2023 and especially beyond come in the NFL draft. And ironically, your mock that you put out this week has the Buffalo Bills taking a linebacker in the first round. Now, before we get into that and before we talk about who you gave the Bills and why, let's talk about this linebacker class as a whole, because it's not, especially if you're looking for a middle linebacker, this really isn't the class for you? There's not a lot of traditional mics in this class. There's not a lot of traditional fits. I don't think the linebacker class as a whole is particularly strong, whether at the top or overall. What are your thoughts on this linebacker class as an entire group?
I think it's pretty good, man, to be completely honest with you. And one player that I think it's completely overlooked is Trenton Simpson from Clemson. Sure, he has some misses. Sure, there's some times where he looks like he's hesitant, whether it's in space or in his drops. But at the same time, like you're talking about a really athletic player that just moves so well. And when I watch a guy that's 6'2", 235, he can play as an overhang. He runs a 4.40. He puts up 25 reps in the bench. Like, he looks like an explosive athlete. Like, it's all there. And when you have that versatile chess piece, like, sure, it doesn't work for every single player. And maybe there's some hesitation from people because of Isaiah Simmons in the past and things like that. And I understand that. But now you're just scouting the helmet. You're not really scouting the player. And when you look at teams in the league today, they should find a way to make him work. And I think if you look at Buffalo, I know when we look at trying to replace Edmonds, we're talking about a 6'5" type linebacker that's, 245 pounds. But I mean, sometimes you got to take what you can get. And if this coaching staff is as good as we all think that they are, you play a guy like that next to Matt Milano, and I think it pans out relatively well for you. That's where I'm at with Trenton Simpson. He's at the top of my list as far as overall linebackers. But going down, I mean, I really like Jack Campbell a lot out of Iowa. I'm really curious how his pro day went. I haven't checked into his numbers. I haven't had a chance yet today. I know he had his pro day yesterday or today, and I know it was yesterday, excuse me. And I know that like the Pittsburgh Steelers were heavily involved in that pro day. I mean, they sent the farm to go look at Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa, potentially Jack Campbell out of Iowa, maybe Kayvon Merriweather, the safety. There's probably a couple dudes that they were looking at, and maybe they weren't round one guys. Maybe they're day two guys. But Jack Campbell had a great combine. I mean, it just is what it is. He had a phenomenal combine. And when we talk about, Tremaine Edmonds, we're looking at Jack Campbell. You're talking damn near the identical size, 6'5", 249. He runs a 4.65. His 3-cone drill is 6.74, and that matches exactly what you see on tape. You see a guy that drops into that mid-hook zone, really fluid with his hips. So I like what he provides, and for me, he's my LB2. But overall, I like this class. I mean, whether it's Deion Henley from Washington State, Drew Sanders from Arkansas, who I'm kind of lukewarm on, but I can see why people like him. When you go further down, Henry Tutu from Alabama, I think is going to be a solid day two pick for a team. So overall, I think it's a good group. I didn't even get into Cam Jones out of Indiana, one of my guys.
Really good Senior Bowl.
I thought he had a good Senior Bowl. So I think it's overall a very good, not very good, but a pretty good linebacker group, and a group that you're going to find some starters. You're going to find some really good depth rotational pieces. And if you look at some of the contracts of the linebackers that have been signed, you're not talking about day one picks from this free agency. Look at Alex Anzalone out of Detroit. Sure. They probably didn't need to give him 3 years and almost $19 million, but at the same time, he fits what they needed. He had 125 tackles last year. He's a leader. He knows the defense. You look at Kaiser White. He goes from Philly. He goes and he signs a free agent deal. These guys are going to make some of these moves, and these guys are pieces that stick in because there's so many different types of packages defensively between nickels and dime packages where you need some of these different types of linebackers. So you're not going to find that prototypical linebacker built in a factory in these drafts anymore. You're seeing guys that are former safeties moved into linebacker.
That's a very fair point. And I think that's where my annoyance comes with this class, is because it's just like a lot of the guys who you see, like whether it's Trenton Simpson or DeMarvion Overshown from Texas, or even Dorian Williams from Tulane, Henley from Washington State. It's these guys who they're in an off-ball linebacker position, Mike and Will. They'll line up at the edge. They're lining up as the overhang or the apex. And so you don't have like a traditional like linebacker class. Like, so I'm on board with you with Trenton Simpson. I love him as an athlete, but I wonder, like, for me, I think his best fit isn't really like a traditional linebacker role. I think it's more of like a big nickel or that overhang apex type of dude and let him just roam and you use him everywhere. And for the Bills, what they've done traditionally with their linebackers is more just, box linebackers. You got your Mike and your Will, and they'll switch and shift and rotate and sometimes get taken advantage of when they shift. So you'll have a Mike who needs to operate as a Mike, but who also has to operate as a Will. But you're not really going to see somebody who, okay, he's in the box here as the Mike. He might be out in the slot on the next play, or he might be on the edge. I like Trenton Simpson a lot. And I know, spoiler, he's who you have mocked to the Buffalo Bills in the first round. And I like him. I like Campbell. We're going to talk about a couple of those guys going forward here in this episode. Do you think the value in this class, is it from like an overall perspective? You talked about how you like it. For me, I feel like the value in this class is more second round through into the third and into the fourth. Like for me, if the Bills were to take a linebacker in the end of round 1 and pick 27, and again, I'm not married to the whole idea of like, well, in the first round, you got to take a guy that's this. I'm not married to that. You and I have talked about before that usually in most drafts, even of like the guys who go in the first round, there's really usually only 15 to 20 guys who have true first round grades in any draft. And then especially as you get towards the back end of round 1, you really start to see some guys go in who are, potentially round 2 guys. And it's just like, okay, those guys get taken. That's fine. For me, I don't have a linebacker with a round 1 grade. I don't know where Simpson and Campbell are going to be my top 2. But again, Simpson, I don't really count as a linebacker. But if I did, he'd be my number 1. Campbell would be my number 2, similar to you. But I don't feel like either of them are worth a first round pick. I wouldn't be distraught if they were the first pick for the Bills. Because again, I think it's a decent marriage of need combined with skill set and value. And I know you nodded your head a minute ago when I said the value is more in rounds like 2 through 4. You're in a similar boat there. Like, do you think there's legitimate first round value for a guy like Simpson or Campbell? Or do you think in an ideal world, the Bills are trading back or somehow one of those guys fall to 59 in the second round, which I don't think that's going to happen. Is that like how you see this class from a top tier value perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think you bring up a great point. Like second, third, early fourth round, you're looking at probably where these linebackers should go. But as we've seen, a lot of movement at the linebacker group overall in free agency, specifically speaking about Buffalo. And I think it's emerged as potentially the biggest need on the team, just simply because of who you're losing. I mean, you're losing a first round player in Tremaine Edmonds. I mean, that's what you lost. And you have to find a way to replace that. And you might have to take 2 linebackers in this draft to do that. You might have to take a guy in round 1 and follow up in round 5 or something and get another depth piece. And it's one of those things. And I think like the best way I can summarize this draft of linebackers is like when you think back to like NCAA, the video game, and you're going through the recruiting class and you have all these like 5 stars like on your class, but they're all athletes. And you're like, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to be. And I think that's kind of what you're at with like some of these guys. Like not all of them are going to be home run picks, like if you take Ventrell Miller out of Florida, you take DeMarvion Overshawn out of Texas, you bring up Dorian Williams, you go even further down, D Winters, Noah Sewell, like these guys are going to be fine late day 2, day 3 type picks. But at the same time, I mean, the farther down the board you go, the less likely you're going to hit on that. And I think as we mentioned about, you have a specific role in mind, that apex, overhang, like playing that specific role for Trenton Simpson. But at the same time, I think he is versatile enough to where if you needed him to move around, slide, shift, play that Mike or Will, and Milano plays the other part, I think that's what you can get out of Simpson. I don't know if you can do that with Jack Campbell. I don't know if you can necessarily do that with Henley. I think Henley's more of a Will. I don't know if you can do that with D Winters, So I think you kind of, the further you go down, you start shooting yourself in the foot. I think the more versatile guy that kind of fits is Trenton Simpson, because I think with his frame, you can put a couple pounds of muscle on there. You can get him faster, strong. I mean, he's already fast. He's running a sub 4.5. I mean, you're talking about speed, size, versatility. And I think when you just talk about your biggest need, that's what it boils down to with Buffalo. And you mentioned 59, Campbell, Simpson. Folks, I don't care how many mock draft simulators you do, send them to me all day long. I don't give a what. They're not going to be there at 59. Like we've done this. I've done this for years for you guys on Cover One, talking about these simulators. And like every single time you're like, well, no, I traded back and I got this and I did. Cool. You do you, bro. But I'm telling you, realistically, probably not going to happen.
So much anger.
It's just so frustrating when I think about it. And when you think about a guy like Simpson, who might be a little bit underdeveloped, you get him in the fifth, you get him in the first round, you get that 5th-year option. I think it's a home run pick. And I know we have kind of jumped off the tracks here a little bit as I get talking about a specific player, but I think you get through kind of the top 5 guys, like I mentioned, Simpson, Sanders, Campbell, Henley, Tutu, and maybe you can throw in Overshawn or Sewell or Winters or something like that if that's one of your guys. But like let's just go with the mock draft simulator for everybody out there, just for an example, real quick. 27, they take a receiver. Let's get sexy. 59, they take an offensive lineman. 91, they take, I don't know, a safety. And then at pick 130, they go ahead and take Ivan Pace out of Cincinnati. You're really going to trust that guy in the 5th round to replace Tremaine Edmonds? Cool. Because you got an A on the simulator. You do that.
and that's where for me, the annoyance comes in, because like, I think the ideal fit for the Bills for me is if we're going to the draft for linebackers, either Trenton Simpson or Jack Campbell. Again, I think Campbell fits more of the prototypical or traditional linebacker mold for them with what he can do. And you already talked about it. Like, with what he does, his ability to read the play, how good he is at functioning and leveraging gaps, he can match in coverage better than I thought he would, for, again, being like 6'5" and 249, basically 250 pounds. He can cover down on underneath routes against wide receivers and tight ends. He's a really good communicator pre and post snap. He plugs gaps. He sifts through traffic in the box. And having some ability to mirror tight ends and running backs and even some slot wide receivers in man coverage was not something I expected to see when I put on the tape. And if we're talking from just the closest thing from a plug and play perspective of the linebackers in this class, I think it's Jack Campbell. Again, we talked about it. I love the idea of Trenton Simpson. And I do think with his athleticism, if you can get him to maintain some better eye discipline in the box and not get misled by some of the eye candy, if you can get him to stop kind of losing the ball in the run game on split zone or different things. Again, some of that this is where scouting comes in with not necessarily knowing the call. For all I know, I'm watching him follow the wrong person on a play and I'm being like, he got misled by the ball. But for all I know, that's literally his assignment. They're telling him on that play, no matter what, you're following Timmy over there. And it's like, okay, I got to go follow Timmy. But you talk about the athleticism, you talk about the versatility. I do like the idea of his ceiling there. If you draft him and you plug him into that Mike spot, again, I also, not to get too off topic with the Bills, I want more versatility and positionless aspects to my defense as much as I possibly can. I want to trot a defense out there where the offense has no idea, okay, who's blitzing, who's dropping into the hook curls, who's dropping into the flats. Are they in man? How many safeties are out there? Can their nickel corner drop as a split safety or a post safety? What's going on? Like, I want as much of that as possible. Now, I don't want to sacrifice actual football ability and skill sets just to have a whole bunch of jack of all trades out there, because then you're just having versatility for the sake of versatility. But I digress. I think Trenton Simpson is a move in that direction. So I'm a fan of Simpson. I'm a fan of Campbell. But to tie it into your point, I would bet my life neither of them are making it to 59. Like, there's no chance in hell that either of those guys are making it through. So you either take one at 27, or then you try to play that dangerous game of, okay, if they're both there at 27, do you try and trade back and get into the mid 30s or the early 40s and hope that one of them fall? But even that's not a guarantee. When you get into the second round, teams just start like taking, well, I think this is the best player on the board and I'm going to take this, or teams might just go for need. There's so much variability, and it's so hard to try and predict that. Like, you could sit, and then also too, you have to find a partner who's willing to dance with you. It's so easy to be like, well, they should just trade down from 27 and trade to 36 with the Rams and then take their third pick and then this and this. And it's just like, it doesn't work like that. Like, what happens if the Rams don't want to trade? And then it's like, well, then you don't have a partner. It's like, yeah, but then to your point, yeah, but in the PFF simulator, I traded with this team a whole bunch and I always get pick number 36 and it works.
Yeah.
It's so if you're addressing that need right there, like if you want to take the best stopgap or the best measure for increasing the floor in 2023 and then having a good ceiling 2024 and beyond, you probably have to take one at 27. Like my gut right now, just on fit in terms of what the player does, I think it's going to be Jack Campbell. It wouldn't surprise me if it's Trenton Simpson, but you really have to take one of them at 27. There's no chance in hell they last to 59, and I think it might be risky to assume you can find a partner to dance with you in order to trade back.
Yeah, well, and beyond that, I mean, you have to look at the teams behind you, right? Like you look at Cincinnati, New Orleans, Philly, Kansas City. I mean, I haven't looked at what their linebacker group looks like in overall contracts. And I mean, I could sit here and pull it up, but
well, I mean, Philly just lost, but Philly's got Nakobe Dean, but they just lost White and TJ Edwards. The Bengals have Wilson and Pratt. The Chiefs are probably okay. But then even to the point too, like, what happens if
you got to start
trades
paying guys? They got contracts coming up for the future, and some teams aren't going to wait a whole year, potentially lose a guy just because next year's class is supposed to be better. That's why you have these scouts year round doing what they're supposed to be doing. You're going to find a diamond in the rough. Maybe that's a Malcolm Rodriguez. Maybe that is somebody else. And
nice Lions plug.
Yeah, right. LionsWire. Check it out, lionswire.com.
Chauncey Gardner-Johnson.
Broke down his film. It's great. No, like you could go ahead and you could go ahead and find that diamond in the rough, but like you have an opportunity to get a guy that it makes sense. And like, I don't think you're forcing your hand. Like I said, I think that has emerged as their potential biggest need, just simply because of the type of player Edmonds was. You lose him, and then you look at Matt Milano, like health can be a scare from time to time with him. And sure, you paid him more money, but just because you paid somebody more money doesn't mean that, or you restructure their deal or whatever, doesn't mean if that guy's going to be healthy all of a sudden. Like it doesn't work like that. So I think you have to look at it and say, hey, and that's a great point by that right there. Campbell to the Steelers at 32. That could very well be in the
Steven put it into the Steelers technically pick ahead of the Bills twice, at the one at 17, then the other one at 32, and they have like no linebackers with Devin Bush gone, Miles Jack on, Spillane left as well. Like they need backers.
Yeah, no, and I think that's kind of, I think those are that it's kind of take your pick. Who do they want? Do they want Campbell or do they want Simpson? Just because the teams that start going after them, and you could look even further down that board in the 30s. I mean, Houston, D'Amico Ryans. You mean to tell me he's not going to covet a linebacker? Arizona, defensive coordinator moves into a head coaching role for them. He's probably going to want a guy of his own. Seattle, they got a ton of picks. I know they brought in Devin Bush, but I mean, Devin Bush is on a 1-year deal. Who's to say that they don't have a specific guy that they might like? I mean, there's enough there where you could justify taking it at 27, just because, again, like we said, two of those guys aren't going to be there at 59. And I mean, you can put trust in a guy like Henley. He's had a great pre-draft process. He could be very good.
But to your point, he's more will than anything. And then you're kind of have a like for like with him and Milano. And I like Henley. Like I like what he does, but then
but he's still new to the position. Yes. Like you're asking a guy that, had some bad tape at times at Washington State, like was running through the arms of offensive linemen and just getting mauled. And other times he
sometimes, I feel like he gets too concerned with just being a hammer, and he's just like, yo, I'm just going to run full speed into this guard. And I'm like, you can't do that. Like, you can't just run into a guy for like, I'm going to blitz. Let me just run into this dude. No, like, do something smarter.
Yeah, and it's great at the Senior Bowl watching a guy cover a wheel route. Like, that's a very tough route to cover. But when you know it's coming, I mean, guys, I coach 12 and 13-year-olds. They know when we're running hook curl and all this other stuff, they just start cheating after a while. Like, it can happen. So, I think linebacker makes sense at 27. And again, it's a good group, but you're going to have to take a guy much sooner than you think. So that's kind of why I'm setting that standard across the board, is you're going to have to take a guy much sooner than you think.
Yeah. There's again, just off of like, would I want to take Campbell or Simpson at 27 if I'm the Bills? In an ideal world, no. And again, I like both players. but they are definitely too good to last to pick 59. Like, there's no way that they're lasting to the end of the second round. I honestly don't think both of them get outside of like 45-ish. Like, maybe push it to 50, but I really don't think so. So again, to your point, like, you either have to trade back and hope somebody dances with you and you can get into the mid 30s or the late 30s and nab whichever one of them is there, especially if you like both. And then maybe you want to play a little Russian roulette and hope one of them fall. But even then, like, because this is such a need, do you really want to play that game? Do you really want to take that risk and hope, well, we can trade back to 36 or whatever. Hopefully one of them will be there. All of a sudden, if they're not, like, then again, you're sitting there with, okay, is it Henley? Is it Overshown? Is it Williams? Is it Toto from Alabama, who I do like as well? Like, he's a nice day 2 target or day 3. But again, then the list gets thinner the further you go down. And then now, if a good player drops later, then you're still kind of forced in. It's like, well, we didn't get one of the linebackers earlier. We have to take a linebacker now. And then you're locked into a linebacker later. And that linebacker isn't going to be the caliber of the one that you technically reached for earlier. That's part of the reason why I'm so annoyed. Like, I genuinely think as of right now, my heart still wants Darnell Wright in the first round, but he's creeping up board, so he might not even be there at 27 anymore. But we're going to talk about offensive tackle in a bit. I really do think the Buffalo Bills go linebacker in round 1, and it's just how much do they kind of go with the more known quantity, what's still a pretty good ceiling in Jack Campbell, or do they go with a little bit more of the versatility, inexperienced, higher ceiling guy athlete in Trenton Simpson and kind of mold him into that spot? I also like the comment that Coach Chapman had earlier in relation to me talking about, misreads for Trenton Simpson. He said, read consistency comes with repetition, and Simpson hasn't had years of box reps because of his versatility and the way he was utilized from year to year. I think that's a fair point. If you kind of just, do you take him and say, hey, man, we're just going to keep letting you do you and be this jack of all trades? Or do you kind of narrow his scope and his focus into, instead of being a jack of, 5 trades, do you just make him a jack of 2 and just try and make him really good at those 2 trades? And because he is a plus athlete and a smart dude, again, I think it leads to that ceiling piece.
Great point.
Right?
No, that's a great point. I think it's one of those where, we look at quarterbacks, right? Like, hey, I can take a guy and let him sit for a year. I mean, you could do that with any position in the draft. Quarterbacks just gets talked about more because of the importance of it. And linebacker, I mean, we can all agree it's kind of like the quarterback of the defense, right? Like those guys got to be vocal. They got to see the whole field. They got to know what's going on in front of them. And I think it's one of those where you're absolutely right. You bring that guy in and you kind of find what he does well, and you just maybe you do narrow that jack of all trades of wearing 10 different hats. You narrow it down to 3 or 4, and he just becomes a stud. And I think that's what ultimately could happen. And I think Buffalo, again, when you talk about simplifying things and getting the best out of a player, especially defensively, I think for Simpson, it's just, that's the home run. That's a slam dunk for me. And not saying he's going to become a 27-time All-Pro guy, but like, I think he's going to be pretty solid in Buffalo's defense if I had to pick.
We got the super chat from the Tree, who I love as a name and as an icon, and who appreciates my tree. Oh, I reversed my sides.
Oh, no.
I'm still used to having the big tree over here and the little guy over there, but still rocking the St. Patrick's Day tree. So I appreciate the tree, appreciating the tree. And thank you very much for being here and for the super chat. Greatly appreciated. The Tree says, linebacker is, so this is built into the idea of like, linebackers kind of being devalued in today's NFL. So he says linebacker is the running back of the defense, and none of these guys have a first round grade. So reaching for a low value position seems bad, right? With a question mark. Some of the pushback I have with that is, in this Bills defense, so much is asked of the linebacker position because they are a nickel defense as their base. Like, they're a nickel over 90% of the time. What Milano and Edmonds have to do, or had to do, and what Milano and this new linebacker will have to do, you have to constantly live in the light and the dark. You have to fit the run and be responsible for the run, usually with a light box or a 7-man box. And if it's a 7-man box, it's usually because nickel corner Taron Johnson, who's 190 pounds, is in the box with you. So even when you're in like a 7-man box, you're still at a disadvantage from a size perspective. So you have to honor the run and fit the run with majority of the time 6 or 7-man boxes. Then You have to be coverage responsible horizontally, vertically. If you were Tremaine Edmonds, you have to know how to match and, carry and cover down on a drag route, or you have to match a slot receiver or a tight end running a post or running a vertical, whether you're matching in quarters or you're in that Tampa 2 and you're covering is basically like a third safety in the middle of the field. There's so much that's asked of that position. So even though it is, I guess, kind of like a lower value position, and even for me, I think it's a position that some of the effectiveness is tied to the defensive line play that you have in front of you. I love Fred Warner, and I think he deserved that contract. But part of the reason Fred Warner is able to be so effective is because the 49ers just continuously rotate velociraptors on that defensive line. They keep him clean, they cause havoc, and he's able to benefit from it. The Bills had it a little bit last year with what Daquan Jones added at times, but that linebacker position, even though it is kind of like a lower value position, for the Bills, it's tremendously important because it's like basically at the apex of everything that happens, whether coming forward or dropping back. It's at a crux. It marries and merges the front with your coverage game on the back end. And there's so much there. Like, then that's what makes it murky. Like, is it a position you want to reach for or invest a ton of capital in? Like, maybe not necessarily in today's NFL, but also you need to have quality there depending on the defense that you are and in general. And the Bills are one of those defenses. Any thoughts on that, Russ?
No, I completely agree with what you're saying, but my point to this is, and it's a great question.
It is a very good question.
But none of these guys have first round grades. Reaching for a low value position seems bad, right? It does seem bad, but at the same time, we're talking about the first round, where occasionally in most drafts, we're talking probably anywhere between 12 to 16 to 18 players get first round grades. And in this draft alone, we're probably talking about 14 to 15 players that truly
I was going to say 15 would probably be like the high end for this class.
Yeah. So the likelihood of a true first round talent being there at 27 it's skeptical. I mean, so it's okay if if the Bills take a player like this at 27, that might be a borderline first round pick because they're picking on the border of the first round. So I think that's how you got to view it. And when you look at everybody wants to talk about need and value, best player available. When you're a team that is this close, if you have everything checked off across the board, you can go ahead, take value, best player available, roll with it. But when you're a team that is this close and you actually have a significant need on the defensive side of the football or offensive side of the football, you fill that need and you try to do it in the first round because that's where you seem like you're most likely to hit. I mean, not always. We all know that. Like you could take three, you could be like my franchise and take three receivers in a row and back to back and three drafts in a row and miss on one of them. And it could be terrible. But yeah, I mean, it's just, that's how I view that. I'm sorry.
No, that's fair. That's also, not linebacker related. But that's been my argument with the whole Bijan Robinson conversation for the Bills is I think Bijan's one of the top three players in this draft. And if he somehow fell to 27, okay, like I'll take. Oh, that's an awesome comment from John. John says 130. There's even more watching now and only 37 likes. Let's smash that like, please. Yes, we say it all the time on the show. I know it may be corny, but likes go. It's a sincerely long way towards helping us to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. It legitimately affects the algorithm and pushes us up. Pops, it's okay that you're late, but I appreciate you coming by, as does Russ. Pops is fantastic. But yes, more likes if you folks would be so kind. If you enjoy this content, of course, please, 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 and thank you. Drop a like on this video. But yeah, that was my thought with Bijan. Like, if you're at the end of the first round, it's like, oh, well, running back shouldn't go in round one. Okay, so what if the Bills traded back to like 34 and then took Bijan? Would you feel better 7 picks later just because it's in the second round? Like being there at 27, usually in most drafts, again, like you talked about, but especially in this one, guys that go at the end of the first round are usually second round graded guys for a majority of teams. So you're not like, so I know it's the value conversation. Again, my reason for it isn't because I think the position is devalued. I just think there will be better players for other positions that I also think the Bills need at 27. That's really what it comes down to for me. But again, I think this is a very healthy conversation and appreciate you, Tree, for the solid reasoning. Also, thank you very much again for the super chat and for being here. And it was a good question. I like thought-provoking questions. Oh, Claude says 27 is basically a second rounder anyway. I'm cool with a second rounder with a top 15 pick upside in Simpson. And again, the huge point, Russ, you made it, and I said it as well. Like, it's a real need. Like, linebacker's a hole right now. Like, offensive tackle is something I'd like to have upgraded. That's technically the other biggest hole, but it's not really a hole because at least you have some semblance of productivity in Spencer Brown. But receiver is more, well, you want an upgrade. And edge or defensive tackle is more, I want an upgrade. Those positions, again, are more upgradable. The linebacker spot is all whole. Like, you have no, even if you think Terrell Bernard is going to be sick, you have no idea because it's pure projection. Like, that's a literal hole the Bills need to fill. I think that obviously kind of murkies and muddies the water a little bit in terms of the conversation there. Let's keep it moving with the idea of what the Bills have done in free agency. Wide receiver, Bills signed Deontay Hardy last week, who myself and Eric broke down in the Cover One film room. We'll be breaking down Trent Sherfield tomorrow, along with Damian Harris. But the Bills have made several moves at wide receiver. But like I mentioned in the intro, I don't think either of those moves prevent the Bills from going receiver in round one or even receiver in round two. The problem, again, this is another position group that I find annoying that you and I have talked about. We talked about it at the Senior Bowl. We talked about it when you were on for the pre-combine show. We've talked about it in the draft. This wide receiver class is just very redundant. It's a lot of slot receivers and Z receivers. There's limited true X receiver potential. And then even at the top tier, we've talked about it so many times. Whoever you have as wide receiver one in this class, if you put him in last year's class, it's probably wide receiver 5 or wide receiver 6. So there's a lot of value questions when it comes to the wide receiver class. Russ, again, we've talked about it in a variety of ways, but, just let's mention it briefly again. What are your thoughts on this wide receiver class as a whole with the redundancy, limited X receiver potential, value, top tier talent? Like, how do you feel about this wide receiver class?
It's fun, but it's not great. I mean,
that's a great way to play. It's fun, but not great.
It's just, that's the way to describe it, right? Like, there is a lot of fun players with this group. I mean, Jordan Addison out of USC, very fun route runner, didn't blow up the combine. I mean, he ran a 4.49, so that's okay. But we're talking about a 5'10" receiver. That's a $171. You kind of expect him to be a little bit more explosive and a little bit more faster. He wasn't. I still think play speed matters. I think he plays well, and I think he can be effective. But I mean, I hate to be the guy that puts the helmet in there, but is he just kind of like Marquise Lee 2.0? I don't know.
We'll kind not a great comp.
Not great. I mean, I don't know. I like Addison a lot, so it's hard for me to say that. But
is he still your wide receiver one?
Yeah, I mean, it's very close between him and JSN.
But see, look at that right there. Like, he's your wide receiver one, and look how you're talking about him.
Yeah, no, and then like you look at JSN, and like the biggest problem I have is the stuff that I heard just during the fall, like in regards to him and his hamstring, and it was like, he's not in the building. He's not, if he is here, it's like, is he giving up on the team? And I'm just like, man, like, I just don't like the sound of that. And he did get hurt in the preseason. He hurt his hamstring. He came back a little bit too soon. Then he had that weird landing in the Notre Dame game.
And
then
I hate looking at it.
It's terrible. And then he ended up kind of playing through it, and it got worse and worse, and he was shut down for the season. But there was a thought that he could come back later in the year, especially as they pushed for, the college football playoff and all that stuff. And he just wasn't there. And it was one of those things. But when you watch him on tape, and just having to go off of what I specifically know off tape, I see a guy that's very effective in orbit motions, jet motions, more of that slot receiver, but I think could play a little bit of X here and there. Not going to be like, not his permanent role by any means. Again, like when you're talking percentage, like he's probably going to play 85 to 90% of his snaps as like out of the slot, and maybe occasion in the X role, but that just simply as maybe more of a decoy or just try to push vertically up the field. And like the long speed, we don't really know about, but like really fluid with his 3-cone drill, like to have a 6'1", almost 200-pound frame, and to have a 3-cone drill of 6.57 seconds, and then a 20-yard shuttle of under 4 at 3.93, like that's fluid. And that's the type of player that he is. So,
and that's what he shows on tape. Like, you see how smooth he is and everything he does. And even when he's like running, he's got the one touchdown oh, who is it? He runs like the little hitch, jukes the defender, takes it for like a 55-yard touchdown. It doesn't look like he's moving fast, but he's outrunning everybody. He's just very smooth. And then you see him test and you're like, oh, the test and the numbers match with what you see on the tape.
Yeah, no, exactly. And he's somebody, you get the ball in his hands and he just like wiggle and gone. And it's like,
Yeah,
where's this coming from? And
fair.
he has like this second gear, this burst that you don't expect from a player like him. And it's
Mm.
fun to watch. And I think he ultimately ends up becoming the first receiver drafted. If I'm going to be honest with you, I have him in my fantasy pros mock 1.0. I have him going 8th overall to Atlanta, just simply off of really need
JSN.
for it. Yeah, simply for
Oh, him and Drake London and Kyle Pitts. Oh, that's cool as hell.
that's why I did it. I mean, I thought about it and I go, I like some of the moves they did in free agency. And we already know that that team's not. Oh, hello, Kendall. Hello. Hop on in with us, buddy. Get in here.
Kendall's a big fancy man now working for NFL media.
But no, so like, just like that fit alone, like they're still probably another year away regardless. And so I think it's one of those where you go ahead and you bring in a guy like that. He starts developing, learning the scheme and everything. And then in another year, Desmond Ritter just completely takes off with 2 solid weapons. And I think or 3 solid weapons if Kyle Pitts is healthy. So to kind of go to like more X receiver guys, you're probably talking Quentin Johnston. Cedric Tillman is really I think the true alpha X in this.
I like Cedric Tillman a lot. I might even, especially 2021 when he was healthier.
Yeah.
And I know he didn't test like it. He looks like he's the fastest dude on the field. And you combine it with the size and some of the route crispness and his frame. Like, I like Cedric Tillman a lot. I know you championed him on the pre-combine show that we did, but especially where you could potentially get him. He's in that class where I think like he and A.T. Perry with what they could offer as X receiver guys are dudes that I like who I don't think are being talked about enough for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, exactly. And like when I called him Alpha X, like I almost said Ultimate X, like the old TNA days.
Bro, that was one of the best wrestling times ever. The X division was Samoa Joe
Phenomenal.
and AJ Styles and Christopher
Christopher
Daniels
Daniels,
and Chris
Alex
Sabin,
Shelley, Chris
Alex
Sabin,
Shelley, Sanjay Dutt, Jay Lethal. Like that squad could go.
Frankie
Like, oh, I
Kazarian.
forgot about Frankie Kazarian. Yeah. Oof.
No, it was awesome. Yeah, we completely got sidetracked.
Super off topic.
But no, Cedric Tillman is very fun, man. Like you think like second round receiver could very well be there at pick 59 for
Yes.
Buffalo. Kind of falls into like that Michael Pittman category. Not always an elite separator, but he goes up and gets it those 50-50 balls. And I mean, you mentioned like there's times he looks like he's one of the fastest dudes on the field. And I mean, he ran a 4.54. Like that's not bad for a guy that's 6'3", 213. His size, he moves pretty well. So overall, I like this, again, similar to the linebacker group as far as I like the group because I think there's a lot of interesting parts in this wide receiver group. But again, I don't see the true alpha dog receiver that I've seen in the years prior. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb. Like I'm not seeing
Even with
that.
I loved Garrett Wilson last year. I thought he was
Chris
sick.
Olave.
Yeah.
Like I don't see that. And a great comment here. Don't forget about Rashee Rice. Sorry, I got to forget about him. I just don't.
Yeah,
I
would say Russ isn't a fan of Rashee Rice. Justin,
I,
actually, to be honest, I'm really not either. Part of that for me, and you and I have had this conversation. There was so much hype about him as being like one of the top receiver dudes at the Senior Bowl, and we went there, and he just did not perform. And then you watch some of the tape, and it's just not great. I know he tested well at the combine, but yeah, for me, Rashee Rice is a little down as well. But teach their own, Justin. Very fair. How do you, Russ, for you real quick, because you mentioned Quentin Johnston. He got mocked to the Bills, I think today by Daniel Jeremiah. I think someone said in the chat, or I think I maybe read on Twitter. What are your thoughts on Quentin Johnston? comment here from Kendall saying that he's also iffy on Rice. Quentin Johnston is one who I don't dislike his game. You know what? I do feel a little better. You and I talked about him pre-combine, being a bigger receiver at 6'4", but not playing like it. Him measuring at 6'2" made me feel better because I was like, okay, maybe that explains some of the reason he doesn't play big because he really isn't that much bigger. But he's a guy who runs like stops and hitches and curls and has the ability to take him to the house after. He's good after the catch. really fast, great on posts, can stretch the field. But I wouldn't hate that pick at 27 for the Bills, but I don't love Quentin Johnston like that. I just feel like, yes, he could potentially grow and get better, but I feel like he is limited in what he is now, which wouldn't be terrible for the Bills. Like, you want somebody who can stretch the field vertically and open things up for Stephon Diggs or Gabe Davis or Deontay Hardy or Dawson Knox. Cool. Just send Quentin Johnston on post all day. And if he beats his guy, which he can because he's a burner, chuck it up to him. If not, you're just stretching the defense. What are your thoughts about Quentin Johnston?
I've actually got a question for you. I'm gonna roll this right back to you. Who would you rather have, Quentin Johnston at 27 or Jonathan Mingo somewhere on day 2?
Mingo all day. But I also love Mingo. Like, my biggest question. So Mingo,
I've never seen I've never seen a receiver just randomly align at H-back and just start leveling dudes. Like, what is going on in the world?
6'2", 220 pounds, ran what, a 4.5? No, a 4.49? 4.46.
Yeah, 4.46.
4.46 at 6'2", 220 pounds. The athleticism, the size, the frame. What I was most encouraged, and I've said this on Twitter, he was one of the guys I was most watching going into the Senior Bowl, because my biggest question was, he comes from that Ole Miss offense. It's so much RPO. He's running just like little hitches and glances and bubble screens and smoke routes like 90% of the time. So my thought was, or my concern was, does he have the ability to run the full route tree? Granted, he could get there, but how high is that floor going into his rookie year? And I watched him at the Senior Bowl, and you saw him too. He was running legit routes. He was beating guys with some nuance and precision and body language and footwork, and you're watching him break down, and it's not taking him 5 steps. He's just pop in 1, 2, 3 steps and getting out of his breaks. He was separating at multiple points in his stem. He's, as we go through, we're going to talk about some round 1 guys and day 2 and day 3 guys. Jonathan Mingo is my favorite value receiver of this draft, and especially for the Bills. He's got a fit that and a skill set that none of the other Bills receivers have. Again, he's 6'2", 220 pounds. He runs a 4.46. You can give him that ball and he can get you yards after catch with either speed or because he's going to truck through corners and safeties. He has a touchdown against Vanderbilt that he takes for like 70 something yards because he runs through the linebacker. It's a real linebacker. He just runs right through his shoulder.
Yep.
He offers a skill set that I don't think a lot of people have in this draft. And then you add it with, potential. He can line up in the slot. I think he's got the frame. You see what you can stack on and what he can do. I would much rather have Mingo on day 2 than I would Quentin Johnston in round 1. Ooh, I love that. I love games like that. That's always a fun one. I like that. Well done.
Yeah, that was, I figured you'd like that. I think it's really interesting. And I think that kind of shows exactly the type of player that Quentin Johnston is. And first and foremost, did this idiot in the comment here, this guy on the screen, did he tell him to tune into the show? Did he tell him that?
Yeah, Kendall, did you tell Daniel Jeremiah why didn't you have him DM me to be on the show and join me and Russ? So you're trying to, I love how Kendall tries to come in and flex because he fist bumped Daniel Jeremiah, but really, Kendall, you just proved your selfishness in this comment right now. And Russ, I'm glad you called him out for it. I'm glad you called him out for it.
Send him a link.
Does he really want? You know what? We can do that. Let's invite Captain Big Shot.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll talk about Quentin Johnston. Look, I like his skill set. As we mentioned, all the stuff about Mingo running through linebackers, playing as an H-back, doing a variety of things. We don't get that with Quentin Johnston. Mingo does. Not saying you should take Mingo in round 1 because I think he needs a lot of polishing and those types of things. But at the same time, I think Quentin Johnston is a first round type of player just because of how explosive he is after the catch.
He is tremendously explosive.
And I think if you get him in an NFL roster where you can really unleash him and see what he truly does away from what TCU does.
Yes.
I think it might really work out for him. But again, it kind of is yet to be seen. And just kind of going off of what we know, I think Mingo has shown a lot of good stuff. And I think I would rather have him on day 2 of the draft compared to a Quentin Johnston. Like if I could get Trenton Simpson in round 1, potentially, a starting guard or tackle or just another depth piece up front on the offensive line in the second round, and then potentially Mingo in the third round, I think that's a home run waiting to happen. But I don't know if Mingo will be there at 91, if I'm going to be honest. I don't even know if he's going to last that long just because of how good he is.
Bro, after we left the Senior Bowl, I had him marked as like, dude, this guy's going to be a 4th round steal. And
I remember you talking about him.
He was one of my main guys to watch, and I liked what he did. And they even, you start to watch some of it. If you watch enough of his tape, again, I've watched like 5 or 6 Mingo games because I really liked him, but that's how much you have to watch because the majority of his games are RPOs, like left and right, RPO routes left and right, which isn't terrible because a lot of teams run RPOs nowadays, but you really got to sift through a lot of tape to see him run, somewhat of a real route tree that he's going to have to in the NFL. Again, what also helped for us is we saw him at the Senior Bowl. Mm-hmm. I really like Mingo a lot. And if we're talking 1st round wide receivers, I don't like dealing in ultimatums or absolutes, even though I am a Sith and I do believe in that nature of the Force. If I'm taking a receiver in the 1st round, in a perfect world for the Bills, I love the fit of Jackson Smith and Jigba falling. The Bills need, despite the fact that they added Hardy and Sherfield, like they need proven slot production. I love the idea of taking JSN and just putting him into the slot, and that's where he is. And give me that. I will take that. Oh, I like that from Coach Chapman. Mingo looks like a 49ers wide receiver there. Arch. Oh, well done there. Nice comp or nice team evaluation there. I would love the idea of JSN coming into the Bills. You plug him right in. That's also part of why I think his fit is interesting in the 1st round and why realistically he could fall to the Bills because he is going to be an 85, 90% slot guy. He's going to be taken by a team that needs a slot guy or values a slot guy that much. And then if you add some of the potential off the field or in season concerns, maybe that drops him a little bit. I'm only taking JSN, Jordan Addison, who you talked about, and Zay Flowers are my 1st round wide receivers who I would consider taking at 27. I really, really, really like Josh Downs. I would rather have him in the 2nd. I wouldn't be distraught if he got taken to 27, but I think he's more of a pure 2nd round guy. I really also like A.T. Perry. He would be a 2nd round guy. I'd like to take him at 59, but again, he's not a slot guy. He's more of, with his frame and what he offers you, he gives you some more true X potential. And he's somebody who, I don't know if it's because he played for Wake or because he's not completely, sexy. I like his game, a long strider, a real smooth guy. He fights through contact. I don't think I've seen, or I can't remember at least, somebody who's drawn as many pass interference penalties downfield as A.T. Perry. Like he's just constantly running through dudes and being dragged down 25, 30 yards downfield. He can create space by leaning into defenders. And he has, for a guy who's 6'5", 205 and is long and lanky, he's got more snap and more suddenness in his game than I thought he would. And so I like him in the 2nd as well. Like I'm not super on board with 1st round wide receiver unless it's one of those 3 that I mentioned.
Yeah. Are you out on Parker Washington? You haven't even mentioned your boy yet.
Oh, well, he's into that 2nd round, 3rd round conversation for me. Speaking of boys, look who it is. Mr. West Coast, Mr. 405, Mr. NFL Media, Mr. Fist Bump Daniel Jeremiah in the hall.
It was a dope
Kendall
moment.
Mursky. Look at you. I really wish there was like a Beanie Baby on the bed behind you or something like that.
I'm sure there's one somewhere in this room. Yeah, there's a bunch right there.
Put your Legos away.
Put your toys away. Clean up. Welcome to the show, Kendall.
Oh, it's been a minute. It's nice to talk to you guys. Russ, congratulations, by the way. I haven't obviously.
Look at him trying to suck up to you right away.
Well, he deserves it. No. He deserves it. Seriously. No, I'm happy for you. Obviously, we're all being back together on camera it's kind of surreal. It's been a minute.
It's been a long time.
But yeah, I saw you guys were on the YouTube talking draft, and I haven't scouted a guy in like 30 days at least. But I'm here for it. I'm absolutely here for it. I still have like 50 dudes scouted, but like it's foggy. It's been 30 days since I've watched any tape. Not gonna lie to you.
Oh man, I would start to go through withdrawal. I think Russ would too.
Yeah.
That'd be hard to go.
I mean, being in the NFL media circles and like listening to everyone talk about prospects and not being able to actually do work on them is a little frustrating.
That's fair.
But I suppose it is my own fault. Like, I get home
Nice humble brag.
7 p.m. and I have time, but I'm just not doing it for no reason.
So hard to scout because I'm doing so much important stuff for the NFL during the day. It's
I'm
really
not.
tough.
I'm just stuck on the 405.
I'm stuck in traffic for 4 hours every day.
That's literally
Well, I mean, when you're at work and it's football for your 9 to 5, and then you get home, you just want to decompress and
a little bit,
watch a movie and play some video games and have some fun or something. I get it.
That's kind of what it's been, but I'd like to get back into it. I think I will too once I get settled in with the new job.
That's very fair.
Awesome. That's awesome.
So Kendall, jump into this conversation here. You know, Russ, you just mentioned Parker
ask
Washington.
Me a question.
How come you're awful? Question.
I have a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons. We can go through the laundry list.
I have a lot of questions. Number one, how dare you? Number two, Russ just mentioned Parker Washington. Obviously, I know you've been watching as we've been having this discussion here. What are your thoughts on this wide receiver class? I didn't lay down a gauntlet, but just talked about like the only receivers I really consider or ideally like in the first round would be JSN, Jordan Addison, or Zay Flowers from a fit and skill set perspective. Wouldn't be appalled if the Bills took Josh Downs because I really like him as a slot receiver. Right. But again, he's more slot only. What are your thoughts on this class? Like, are you cool with the top tier, or do you lean more into that second tier of guys, which is basically like the Josh Downs, the A.T. Perrys, the Parker Washingtons of the world, the Jonathan Mingos? Like, how do you feel about this class in terms of the Bills like finding things they need?
Well, what I will say is when I've been doing mock drafts, I've noticed that I've stayed away from wide receiver in round 1, and I've noticed I trade back for Downs if anything. Okay. But I think what you guys were saying, especially about Quentin Johnston, I really related with. He's one of the guys I scouted. I felt exactly what you were saying, and like he's someone who's big, but he doesn't necessarily play big. You don't see him going attacking the football at the high point. He's a Willie Mays catcher. He likes to bring it in the basket catch over the shoulder. Yeah, but you never see him really go up for it, and it's a little weird given his size. And then talked about Rashee Rice. He's someone who goes up and gets after it, but you wonder about, the full route tree of things. And obviously he's probably a day 2 kind of guy. But he's it's definitely the microphone. I have nothing set up. And literally you probably just watched me. You probably just watched me set up my camera, Ant.
I did. That's why I waited until you were ready, until I saw you fix it, and I was like, okay,
I literally just set up my camera 5 minutes ago. But I will say, I think the 4 guys that you mentioned, Johnston, Flowers, JSN, and Addison, I think those are the 4 guys in play in round 1. I think you can make an argument for all 4 of those guys fitting the Bills. But then you get into like the Parker Washingtons, the Josh Downs, the Nathaniel Dells of the world. I think there's some redundancy with a few of those guys. I mean, given the moves the Bills have made specifically, I mean, if we're talking Bills scope specific, like Parker Washington, there's a part of me that feels like there's some redundancy with Khalil Shakir and like the lower body thickness and the run after the catch, like style of contact balance after the catch type of guys.
Not a ton of breakaway speed, but enough speed and athleticism.
Right. And it's not to say that 2 of those guys is a bad thing, but you wonder, like, can you diversify the portfolio that is the wide receiver position? That's always been my philosophy with any position that you're going to build through committee, and you're going to, like, even a running back group, like, you want to have a center. You want to have a guy that's going to go get you short yardage, goal line type of yards. You want that guy in the middle who's going to be balanced, and you want that satellite scat back. If you have all of those skill sets, they're all going to complement each other. And I think given the ways that the Bills utilize their receivers and they preach versatility, they want guys to align in different areas, be responsible for different things. You kind of allow yourself for a little bit of redundancy because you want versatility and you want guys to be able to do some of the same things. So you're not predictable in terms of where these guys align and stuff like that. So I think there's a bit of grace in that regard for example, a guy like Parker Washington, but I do wonder how deep you go into that bag of overlapping skill sets. And I think with this wide receiver draft class in general, sorry to get long-winded, but I think there's a lot of guys that, I mean, obviously this has been the trend. There aren't those big prototypical like X receivers like Quentin Johnston is. And you're just kind of trying to find guys that can maybe produce a sliver of that X receiver responsibility and see how much, as you say, Ant, squeeze blood out of that stone. Like see how much you can get out of a guy like Josh Downs. Like, can you get any blood out of that X receiver stone from Josh Downs? And like, I feel like that's kind of the game you're playing with a lot of these guys. It's like, how much can you get out of him if you want to put him in that role? Or is he really just a slot guy? And I think you kind of keep running yourself into that wall specifically in this wide receiver class.
I think that's super fair. And honestly, it kind of like speaks to what, Russ, you and I were speaking about earlier with this class and just overall the redundancy, but the fits and the value. Anything to add on this wide receiver class, Russ?
Well, no, I mean, you guys kind of summed it all up. A lot of slot guys, as we said, there's not a ton of X receivers. I think in the first round, we might see 3, maybe 4 guys go. Maybe there's a chance for a 5th if a Jalen Hyatt or a Josh Downs end up going. But I don't really know. I think Flowers, Johnston, JSN, and Addison are the guys that are going to go. And we'll kind of see what happens with that 5th spot. I think that's the max is 5 receivers going. If we saw 6, I would be a little surprised, but crazier things have happened. But as you get further down, I mean, the day 3 of the draft, late day 2, day 3 of the draft, I like Charlie Jones from Purdue quite a bit.
Ooh.
I don't think he's somebody that gets enough love. And I thought he had a relatively good pre-draft process. I mean, he ran the 40 in just over 4.43. He is a $175, so he's a little light, but he's kind of a gamer, right? Like, he's been through a ton of different systems in college. He made it work in Purdue. When you think about a solid slot receiver that's going to be really consistent, I think that's the fit. I think Buffalo with Charlie Jones would be great. Jaden Reed is obviously my boy from Michigan State. I'll always mention him when we're talking receivers. Insane tracking ability for a guy that's 5'11", a $187. But he ran really well at a 4.45, and he was doing this with like one eye. So like, I really wonder.
That was impressive.
I do wonder what would happen if he was, fully healthy. But he had a great combine, or a great Senior Bowl, a great combine, and he'll have a good. Or I think he had a pretty good overall pro day as well. So I think he's somebody that will probably go under the radar, could be a fun little special team or gadget type player, but could carve out kind of that number 3, number 4 potential slot receiver role at the next level.
I think what's going to determine a lot of the receiver play in the draft for the Bills is going to be what they envision for Khalil Shakir.
Yeah.
Is he going to be the slot guy? Okay, then if so, you're looking more for a boundary receiver potentially. Or, again, his boundary snaps and his slot snaps were almost 50-50 last year as a rookie. So if you view him as a slot guy, cool, you're looking for more of a boundary guy. If you're looking for him to play more on that boundary, you're looking for more of a slot guy. And I think that's going to be super important in terms of determining what kind of receiver the Bills go after. I like this one from Justin, Xavier Hutchinson. I like him towards that end of, depending on where he creeps up, that end of day 2, but I think like that day 3-ish range, like the round 3 to 4 type area. I like what he offers. I'm going to be on Team Mingo all day. I just think it's a skill set the Bills do not have. I like how he projects. I even like the floor that he offers, and I think he gives you enough versatility that, okay, cool. You can put him in the slot and let him do some things, but with his skill set, you want to run him on some wide receiver screens or some drags, or you can send him deep or just let him moss some guys and just go up and use that frame. I think there's a nice way to ease him in as a rookie while kind of building him up and letting him kind of hit that potential ceiling. Very interesting conversation around the wide receivers. Let's get to another position group. Let's get to the offensive tackles. Russ, I'm going to start with you. Evaluate this tackle class, which I think is a good one. You've got the Skoronskis and the Paris Johnsons and the Broderick Jones and the Darnell Wrights. And I don't want to start, getting into too many, because honestly, you could list a ton of guys. I even like some of the film I saw from Anton Harrison from Oklahoma. Like there's athleticism in this tackle group. There's good top tier value. There's some good day 2 and early day 3 value. What are your thoughts on this offensive tackle class as a whole, as the Bills potentially look to bring someone in to either compete with Spencer Brown or beat him for that right tackle job?
if they try to do, the beating of Spencer Brown, somebody to beat him for that top spot, I would have to think they would look in the first round to do so. I think overall it's a really good offensive tackle group. We're going to see a lot of starters come out of this. I think Skoronski's a starter at the next level. I really struggle with where he ends up going. I kind of stick with the Patriots at 14, the Packers at 15, and the Steelers at 17. I think that those are like the ideal spots for him.
You think he plays tackle in the NFL, or do you think someone takes him and kicks him to guard? Okay.
I think he can play tackle. And I felt the same way with Rashawn Slater. And the reason why I feel like this for guys
those Northwestern linemen, man, like everybody's just like, no, kick him into guard.
Did Slater have short arms?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't.
Shorter arms. It was shorter than expected.
Regular for like good length for a normal human, but
not Paris Johnson sized arms.
Correct. Not like 36 and an eighth. But and it's one of those where I got burnt. One of the first years I started doing this was Deion Dawkins. I got burnt, and I thought he was a guard, and I was so consistent. He's a guard. He's a guard. He's a guard. He ends up being a tackle and a long-term left tackle for the Buffalo Bills. And it's one of those where I'm like, he's a tackle. I'm going to let him do his thing. Unless like, if he came out and his arms were like 31 and 3/4, okay, guys, he might be a center, but it's one of those, like, I like this group overall. Broderick Jones is my top offensive tackle. I know he's only got 19 career starts, but there's so much to work with him, and he gets in space. Devastating run blocker. The more I like a Paris Johnson, the more I like. You see the length, athleticism. I think he chips and climbs to the second level really well. Those combo blocks, he does a pretty good job with as well. Again, Skoronski, just so consistent as a technician. Again, the only thing that might hurt him is length at the next level, but we'll see. My guy, Darnell Wright, I've been on that train since November. And I think when you look at Tampa Bay at 19, Tristan Wirfs is going to go to left tackle for them as they let Donovan Smith go.
Yeah, be so awesome.
Darnell Wright at 19 is just going to be a plug and play snatch trap technique. Vicious mauler.
Is that a real technique?
That's a real thing.
I've never heard of it.
But as you go deep, as you go deeper, I think Anton Harrison out of Oklahoma is a first rounder. I like some of the tenacity that he plays with. He's really athletic as well, and he's got 34 and an 1/8 inch arms. But deeper you go, Cody Mock, DeJuan Jones. I know I'm missing a name. My boy Matthew Bergeron from Syracuse.
Yeah. Tyler Steen is somebody who I like on the back end of.
Don't steal my last guy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wasn't Russ clamoring for him?
We were talking about him in the end. I thought you were having like a brain lapse moment. I was kind of teeing you up, like talk about Tyler Steen.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair.
No, tag team, bro.
You're good.
Don't try and get angry at me because Kendall ruined the show. Like, don't.
I definitely ruined the flow of the show for sure.
No, it's all good. I'm just joking around. No, I like Tyler Steen as well out of Alabama. I think he could be a guard, but I think just with the length that he has and the way he anchors, I mean, there are times that he's sitting there and there are corners just coming out of outer space trying to light him up, and he like just digs his feet in the ground and it sits and locks these guys out, and it's pretty impressive. I think he's a solid 3rd, 4th round pick, and I like him quite a bit. So I think overall you're going to find an offensive tackle here. It's just a matter of who you're going to find at right tackle. I think guys like Anton Harrison, potentially Matthew Bergeron, definitely Darnell Wright. Those guys are more of like those, I think, plug and play right tackles. But really you can take any of these guys and potentially do it. But it takes some time because remember, you're switching post foots and set foots. Now you've got your left foot forward rather than your right. You got to slide with your right foot rather than your left or vice versa. So it's all a little bit different.
I like this comment from Pops, who said Kendall doesn't even have a tree or a plant. Russ has a plant, and then I have the tree. So, Kendall, you failed here. Kendall, what are your thoughts here on this offensive tackle group? Do you see it as – how much of a priority do you see it as for the Buffalo Bills? Is it something you're looking to address in round 1? Is it something you're looking to address on day 2? How do you feel about this class as a whole and in terms of the urgency the Bills need to operate with and kind of potentially attacking it?
I was literally just going to ask you the same question because didn't the Bills just sign Questenberry today?
They did. They re-signed him.
So I'm not going to sit here and say that precludes them from taking a tackle in the first round, but I think the Bills have done everything they can. Year after year, they do this in free agency to plug up the immediate holes and make themselves flexible in the first round.
Yeah.
And they've done it for the most part this year, but there's still a glaring need, and it's still linebacker. So it kind of makes me wonder, like, until they plug that hole in some sort of way where, the fan base kind of feels comfortable with the depth of the position, it does kind of seem like that first overall pick is going to be a linebacker. It just kind of feels that way with the signing of Damian Harris, with the signing of Questenberry. It just feels like there's more depth to the point where they can pick any position, but it just keeps coming back to linebacker because that's like the most glaring need of all of the needs. So honestly, I think it's a great tackle class, and I think it is pretty top heavy for the most part. I'm sure you could find a guy. I haven't dug deep into it, but this is actually where I wanted to ask a question. Jalen Duncan. We haven't talked about him, and I know he was like a high recruit, was he not? And I know he's a bit on the lighter side of things.
Yeah, like
And
306 pounds.
I'm also
roughly.
not sure if he cut weight to like be a little bit more athletic at the combine. What kind of gamesmanship he went through in that regard. But I am curious if either of you guys have watched him and if that is someone who makes more sense for day 2 for the Bills.
Oh, Russ, you and I talked about him at the Senior Bowl a bit as well. The weight is an issue for me. I watched him against Ohio State, and Zach Harrison was just chucking him around left
and Zach
and right.
Harrison's a light guy, right?
Yeah, but he's long and he's big.
Okay.
If we're looking at it from a weight perspective, I think he's in the 270s, like 270.
Oh, okay. I thought he was much lighter.
I think Zach.
Oh no, he's not that light. He was Zach Harrison. Like when you think of like Carlos Basham, that's Zach Harrison.
Gotcha.
Like kind of that awkward frame.
Yeah,
he's
6'5", 274 pounds.
Probably should be a 5
is what he's listed
guy.
at. But he's long, he's big. It felt like he was bullying Jalen Duncan a lot. And honestly, like 3 of the first 5 snaps, Duncan is on the ground because Zach Harrison is just chucking him. Whether it's in like he's setting the edge and then just shucks him, or it's pass rush and he's down on the ground. Again, he's athletic, he's lighter, but I wonder how that frame can hold up against NFL edges who are going to try and run through him. Russ, what are your thoughts on Mr. Jalen Duncan?
No, look, I like him. I think he's one of the more overlooked offensive tackles in this class. I think when you think of like that prototypical swing tackle, he's going to be that guy that could play left or right for a team. He's a former 4-star recruit, didn't start playing football till he was 14 or 15. But he's got a bunch of experience at Maryland. And when he was at the Senior Bowl, if I remember correctly, he was like 294. And as far as weight, and he put on 12 pounds, and he still tested relatively well for a tackle. So he's just got to figure out the playing weight and get the core strength and just the lower body and the anchoring down. And if he does that, he's got the skill set. He was somebody that I was really hopeful in the summer, and I started kind of writing down in definitely a pencil, very light pencil, like mechanical pencil, and saying that he was OT1. And I thought there was a chance, but he just did not have the year. But I think when you get into that late third, that middle to late third round, early fourth round, you look at an offensive tackle like this. I think I would take Tyler Steen over him just simply because of how much more stout Steen is. But I think Duncan is interesting. And if you want to talk about potential, and if Spencer Brown's going to be your guy and you're just looking for that more athletic swing tackle type guy, I think I'm sorry, I read the comment. I love the discussion of mechanical pencils.
That's what we're here for.
But no, I think when you look at like a day 3 value, I think that's the type of guy that you're looking at, just because there's a lot of tools to work with.
I think that's fair. I'm still, if we're breaking it down by day, I'm still hoping for Darnell Wright at 27. I cannot get off this idea. Like, I was impressed with him at the Senior Bowl from an on-field perspective. I was impressed by his answers when Russ, you and I interviewed him and spoke with him after day one of practice. And then his tape, like, you watch him battle Will Anderson and you watch him battle Dallas Turner and you watch him get the better of these quality guys and just compete rep after rep, and you watch the technicality with the snatch and trap, and you watch the physicality. Like, I always give that example. He's like a grizzly bear out there. Like, he just mauls dudes, and I think he's only going to continue to get better. I think he's somebody who, if you take in round one, he's a plug and play starter. I think he beats out Spencer Brown, and you're putting him at right tackle. My only concern for him is whether or not he lasts. Initially, my thought was he's going to be there at the end of round one. He's starting to generate more buzz. Russ, you even talked earlier now, like, about him going to the Bucs at 19. The tackle class it varies in terms of ranking depending on who you ask. Some people don't even think Skoronski can be a tackle. Some people have Paris Johnson as the tackle one no matter what. Some have Ant Harrison ranked up a little higher. Harrison's another guy who I like potentially in that first round as well. Like, the athleticism is so appealing with how quick and strong and athletic he is, and everything that he like struggles with is correctable, like inconsistent hand placement or needing to latch on a little bit more in the run or coming off a bit too high on combo blocks. Like, it's and even with that, even with the inconsistent hand placement and playing high a bit in the run and in pass protection, he's still like torquing guys, and he's still beating guys, and he's still refitting and resetting his hands. Like, you see the athleticism and the twitch, and you watch a guy who needs to clean up his feet and needs to clean up his technique, and you're still watching him win, even though like he's messy in those areas and needs to clean that up. So imagine what happens if you get him into the building and you can clean up those aspects of his game. I would love for the Bills to address tackle in the draft. I think this offensive line still needs work. It's still my biggest priority in terms of what I think they need to address. Much to Kendall's point, and Kendall, Russ and I talked about it earlier. Russ has Trenton Simpson mocked to the Bills in his 1.0 mock draft for Fantasy Pros that he launched this week. I'm in a similar boat. Like, I really think they go linebacker in round one right now, whether it's Campbell, whether it's Simpson. I would really, 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 really like it to be Darnell Wright, or maybe even a tackle in general. If we're going into day two, we talked about somebody who I really like. I like Matthew Bergeron a lot, mainly because of that guard tackle flexibility. I've come around more to the idea, though, of potentially putting him at guard more instead of tackle. But either way, I don't think you're going to lose, especially for a team like the Bills. You put him in, okay, let him compete with Spencer Brown, and you see what happens. You got another guy who the athleticism, the quick feet, somebody who I think is still scratching the surface on what his ceiling can be, and who still needs to clean up some area of his game, similar to Ant Harrison, right? Like, his footwork isn't always clean. His hand placement can get a little wonky, but he still finds ways to win. He's got good lateral agility. He climbs to that second level. Like, his anchor can be inconsistent at times, but again, it's from technique. It's not because he isn't strong or doesn't have the flexibility or the core strength or like the strength in his hands. It's just because he needs to be more consistent. He was another guy too. Like, I literally have in my notes, like, even with poor hand placement and being high at times, he's able to people move with weight transfer and functional strength. Like, he's a guy who it's not always pretty, and he's just moving guys. And he's got that athleticism where you're not going to beat him around the arc. I like him a bunch. And then, I'm not trying to steal your thunder at all, Russ. I've really come along on Tyler Steen. I DM'd you about him the other day. I forgot who.
I have another one for you too.
Oh, okay.
Wait, go ahead. Do your thing though.
Okay. I wasn't watching for Alabama. I don't remember who I was watching, but they were obviously playing Alabama. And I just kept noticing, like, 54, like, just kept looking good. And 54. And I was like, who is 54? And then I was like, oh, that's it, because I hadn't gotten that far yet. And so I stopped whoever I was watching on defense, and I just loaded up a whole bunch of Alabama tape and then just watched Tyler Steen. And he was one to tie into somebody on the edge class that we're going to talk about a bit. I was watching him and Felix Anudike-Uzomah just battle in that bowl game.
I have questions about him.
Left and right.
I haven't watched him yet. I'm curious to know what you have to say.
He's fun. Russ and I both like him. We're going to get there. But yeah, watching him and Tyler Steen battle left and right, because that's also like like you use that measuring stick. So if you like, I value Uzama, Russ. I know you do too. So I'm watching Tyler Steen go toe to toe with him left and right. And sometimes he loses, sometimes he wins. I was like, okay, like that's part of what got me on the Darnell Wright hype train, watching him go up against Will Anderson and hold his own and win a bunch. And I was like, oh, like that's super encouraging. And so I've really come along on Tyler Steen. He's my favorite. I don't even know. Initially, I thought he was a day 3 guy. Maybe he creeps into the back end of day 2 potentially with what he offers and how solid he is on tape.
It's a premium position.
And that's what that's kind of what's influenced my thinking there. Russ, who's your guy? What do you got for me?
Who's a sleeper?
Yeah, the other guy is Carter Warren from Pittsburgh. I don't know if anybody's watched him yet or has any notes.
A little in passing, not enough to get my full thoughts on him right now.
Yeah,
and I don't want to bullshit it because I watched highlights one time, and I'm going to tell you I scouted the guy.
No, you're good. I mean, we're talking 6'5", 311, almost 36-inch arms, super quick feet. He only played 4 games this past year. He tore his ACL, but he had a ton of tape a year ago, and it's really good tape. I mean, when you're talking potentially left tackle, right tackle, the athletic ability, it's all there, and he's just a good dude. He's a team captain. So when you got the length, the athleticism, he's got some fun tape. Now there's times where his anchor, his core strength gets tested, but I think he is somebody that can operate in space. He's got pretty consistent hand placement. He can reset his hands. So I like him quite a bit. And as we look at 3rd, 4th, maybe even 5th round offensive tackles like the Tyler Steens of the world, I think Carter Warren. So I like him quite a bit.
Very nice. Very nice. He's a name that's starting to creep up into some boards. I think he's one too who like is always available on the back end of the PFF mocks. And so everyone just keeps taking Carter Warren because he's like there. It's like me with, granted, I really like him, Muhammad Ibrahim from Minnesota. Every time he's available in the 6th round, I know he's going to be there. And I'm just like, Ibrahim, every single time. Like, I know he's going to be there.
Get yourself a hammer for nothing.
Why not? Why not? Let's pivot to 2 position groups, but in one larger conversation, the edge and the defensive tackle classes, who are both position groups that I mentioned it on Twitter this week. I've talked about it really all off season. I think edge is a bigger need than is being talked about right now for the Buffalo Bills. I don't want to get into numbers too crazy, but the pressure percentage and the sack rate drastically dropped once Von Miller went down, and you saw this defensive line kind of get exposed a bit. And you're going into this year right now, Von is going to miss time at the beginning. So it's Gregory Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, and Boogie Basham. AJ Epinesa really isn't built to be a number 2. Boogie Basham definitely is not built to be a number 3. AJ Epinesa is a UFA next year. What are you doing with him? What's going to happen with Basham in a couple of years? What happens with Groot in a couple of years? You're looking at the defensive tackle group, and you've got Daquan Jones, but he's a little older. You've got Ed Oliver on that 5th-year option. Does he leave next year in free agency? Tim Settle is 3rd on the depth chart right now, and he did not have a good year last year, especially as the year went on. I think edge is a need. I think defensive tackle is a need. This defensive line group as a whole is a position group that I think could genuinely get attention from the Buffalo Bills. It would not shock me. I know it would be much to the dismay of a lot of Bills fans. If a really good edge dropped in round 1, it would not shock me if the Bills went edge. If somehow Miles Murphy or Nolan Smith fell in round 1,
happening.
I would not be shocked. I would not be shocked if Bean ran up and drafted one of those guys.
We have too much sample size of evidence to go against that idea. Like,
I think it's fair.
Bean would do that.
He would do it. Like if it's best player available, truly, and especially with how they value the trenches, especially defensively. And again, I don't think that's a horrible choice. I think you need to increase the floor and ceiling of the defensive line. We'll see what you can get going forward with that. Russ, what are you laughing at?
I can't wait for them to take Keon White just to piss you off.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Wait, Ant, have you watched Keon White, and do you affirm everything that Russ said?
I was going to come in. I was literally going to mention right now. I was watching Ole Miss and Georgia Tech because I was watching Mingo. And Keon White is just like ineffective. And you know what? I shouldn't say that because
he's there. He's on the field.
You see the strength and you see the burst. And you see the athleticism. You see all the stuff that makes you go like, oh, like this guy has like a lot of potential.
Point of attack?
Correct. Like he's not in the play. Like he's beating his guy or blowing him up, and he's nowhere near the play. And he's just not like there's a lot of sizzle and no steak for me when it comes to Keon White. And it's really frustrating because he looks the part on paper and in person. He was impressive as hell as like a specimen at the Senior Bowl when we saw him. There's also Kendall, like every day after the Senior Bowl practices, because all the players are all tracked up with the Zebra GPS stuff.
Yeah.
So they're tracking like steps and miles per hour and speed and all that. And Keon White was like 2 to 3 miles per hour faster than every single defensive lineman every single day. Like everybody would be like in the 15s and he'd be at like 17 or 18, like consistently ahead of everybody all the time. But yeah, then you watch the tape and it's just frustrating. I'm not even going to acknowledge him. Russ, I hate that you even put that energy out there for Mr. Keon White happening at pick 27. But let's stay there. Let's talk about this edge grouping. Russ, evaluation of this edge class. I think it's a pretty strong edge grouping as a whole, but especially top tier, potentially round 1 and 2 guys, even going into round 3. Who do you are there any round 1 edges within a realistic nature that you think fall to 27 and that could potentially tickle the Bills' fancy there?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned falling. I don't see Miles Murphy falling. I think he's incredibly overlooked. I think back to the draft of Rashawn Gary, he ends up going top 15. I think that's kind of the same thing here with Murphy. I would be stunned if he made it past 20 of Seattle. Like, depending on what Seattle does at 5, even Detroit at 18, what they do at 6, we'll kind of see. Those two teams might take an edge rusher or defensive lineman at 5 or 6. So it might not necessarily happen at 18 or 20, but if they end up going corner or quarterback at 5 or 6, then that edge rusher need kind of becomes a thing at 18 and 20. So I have a hard time believing he falls that far. And that said, Lucas Van Ness would be kind of the player I would circle to. And I know people are going to say, oh, he's an Iowa guy. What about Epinesa? Blah, blah, blah. And I hear you, but now you're just scouting the helmet.
Yep.
Van Ness is completely different. Former hockey player, a lot of power into his game, but he's pretty versatile. Can play that 4-eye. He can stand up off the edge. And he's got big hands. He's strong. He's quick. He's explosive. I like his game the more you watch it. And I now see why he got the first round buzz from the very beginning. But if I had to choose, I would wonder if they would even consider this. And it wouldn't be in the first round. It would more so be on day 2. And that's Isaiah Foskey, the 6'5", 265 from Notre Dame, 4'5", 840, had 22 reps in the bench. He's got a nice blend of speed and power in his game. And I just wonder if he's somebody that maybe fits more of what they're looking for, specifically at like 59. I don't know if he's going to be there again. He might go way sooner than we think. But once you get away from those top guys, I think it gets a little bit questionable as you look at, Derek Hall, BJ Ojolari, Will McDonald. Are those guys do they fit what is being looked at by the Bills prototypically? Probably
no one
not.
knows.
Right. But probably not. Like if we're talking about size, I think they have kind of a certain size, a threshold. Eric always mentions it. I don't know if those guys necessarily make that threshold, especially like Derek Hall. I think he'd be fun as hell at 27. I think he's one of, kind of my sleeper favorite type player in this draft, but I don't think they would take him at 27. And I don't even know if they'd take him at all.
They draft with a specific archetype at edge. And Kendall, you and I have talked about this on Twitter on multiple episodes. I hate the archetype that they go for.
It's so annoying.
It is. They go for pure pocket compressor guys. They do not look for bend or athleticism or flexibility. Von Miller is very much the antithesis of the archetype they go for. Now, my question with that is, did they break their archetype because it's Von Miller and who cares what your archetype is? If you can get Von Miller, get Von Miller. Or did that potentially signal a change in their philosophical thinking when it comes to the edge archetype? Because they need more athleticism. They need more bend and speed. You need guys who can run down Patrick Mahomes, who can get around the arc and who have some more twitch and violence. Two names that I like, Kendall, you already mentioned one and we'll get into them. These are guys who I had originally thought they were more like second round guys. And the more I've watched the tape, I would be okay with them going to the Bills, even as high as round 1 and 27. And that is Mr. Felix Anaduke Uzama and BJ Ojolari. from LSU. His athleticism, his violence, Russ, your tackle one, Broderick Jones, watching him go up against Ojulari in LSU, Georgia, and watching Ojulari just get him around the arc, go through him, go inside. He's fast, he's violent, he's twitchy, he's got a motor, he competes on every rep. Like, he is someone who, that athleticism, I would love to inject into the Bills like edge grouping, just because of what he offers. Like, again, violent, quick, he's attack minded, he's got speed to get around the arc, but he's also got the quickness to get inside. He'll penetrate against the run, he works against the run, he sets a good edge. And I think he's still building on pass rush plan and moves and technique. And I think you can add that polish to the athletic ball that he is, combined with the violence and the motor. And then again, somebody who I've watched a ton of Felix Anudike-Uzomah tape these last. Well, Russ, you and I talked about him going to the combine, and so I was already very familiar with him. He was already one of my favorite guys, and he's just crept up even more. And I know, Kendall, you had questions about him. Like, he just, what I also think is really encouraging, all three of us have talked in the DM about Will McDonald playing in that 3-down front for Iowa State and how it wasn't advantageous to him.
Right.
Uzomah plays in a 3-down front in Kansas State. And at 6'4", 255 pounds, you're like, oh, well, he's probably getting work. He's not. He's aligning in a 4 technique or a 4-eye. He's got his hand in the dirt. He'll come off the edge sometimes in more like a 5 tech or a 7 in a 2-point stance. But he just competes on every rep. He battles against the run. He's got a ghost rush. He's got a bull rush, a cross chop, and a swipe.
Oh, really, so he's got a repertoire.
Yes. Really active hands, good grip strength. My favorite thing by far for him, when he goes around the arc, he flattens against everybody. His angles to the quarterback are efficient, especially going around the edge. He's violent. He's got power and push as a spiker. He's got good core strength. He plays with lean and leverage. He's somebody who initially I had a 2nd-round grade on him. The more tape I've watched, and Russ, I'm interested to get your thoughts on him as well, because I know you like him and I know you watched him, and I want to get your thoughts on Ojulari as well. Those are two dudes who I think, from an archetype standpoint, would add a skill set that the Bills edge grouping needs as far as athleticism and violence and quickness, but also who have some varying levels of technique that you can build upon. I think they're two guys who could increase the floor of this Bills edge grouping in 2023, but then also the ceiling going forward, considering their traits and their athletic profile combined with what you can add from a technique perspective in addition to what they already have.
No doubt. I mean, I love that kid. I really do. I love
Uzomah?
seeing him. Yeah, no,
Right?
I love him. I love seeing that he's getting that 1st-round buzz. I think it's warranted because he's a lot further along than he should be for a player that has only played, limited snaps in college.
And especially in that stupid 3-down, not stupid, but that 3-down front.
It is
like
stupid.
It's not putting
that
him
big
in
12 front.
Spot. Yeah. Like, he gets double teamed a bunch, and he holds the point of attack against the run, but he'll also split the double teams just because of motor and violence in the pass rush. Like, he shouldn't be as productive as he is.
No, absolutely. And I think he's one of those guys that, like, if the Bills are going to want him, they're going to have to take him at 27 because just the teams that are behind him. And I will say this, if Houston is on the clock at 33 and Uzomah is there, that's the guy. Like, him with D'Amico Ryans and in Houston would be incredibly fun. And honestly, like, they could get their QB at 2. They could potentially get Myles Murphy at 12. And then they could even follow it up with Uzomah at 33. And Uzomah and Myles Murphy would be absolutely filthy with D'Amico Ryans. Like, no, I like his skill set a lot. You're hitting everything on the head there. 6'3", 255, a plethora of pass rush moves. I like his skill set. He tested well. He's explosive. The motor is just going and going.
We also know that he has a plan based on what he said at the podium in Indy, right? Not only does he have moves, he knows how to use those moves.
And that's exactly. And you'll see him set those moves up, like, and go to them. Like, you'll see him attack the arc and attack that soft shoulder around the outside to then come back inside. And he's doing it against the Tyler Steens and the Ant Harrisons of the world. Like, he's doing it against, like, good tier prospects and then beating lower tier prospects regularly.
And that's how I feel about Kalijah Cansey out of Pitt. Like,
you're preaching to the Kalijah Cansey choir right here, my man.
Bro, like, it's so crazy to me. I watched more of him was it Saturday afternoon? I think it was in between one of the games on Saturday for March Madness, and I was watching him just a little bit, and I'm looking and I'm watching, and I'm like, dude, this guy's plan is so good, and he's so there. If you add 1 inch on his arms, he's a different type of player.
Or you add like
And
10 pounds, like just to make people be comfortable because he's 290 or like 293.
Yeah, he gets an inch taller. He throws on 10 pounds. This guy's a top 5, top 10 pick, easy.
Yeah.
And I think there's a chance he could still be a first rounder. But similar to like Uzama, he's got some things like, Uzama isn't like your prototypical 6'5" edge rusher. He's 6'3", like I said. Cansey's 6'1", but these guys have a plan and it works. And I think when you get those guys one-on-one in those phone booths, in those windows, they are going to win. And I think that's kind of the case for guys like Uzama and Cansey.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. And it also too, like, depends on what type of situation they can go to. Like, I think Cansey, despite the weight and the size, and I know Bills fans are going to hear his weight and size and think Ed Oliver, and they're going to immediately be like, no, thank you. He holds up well against the run. His ability to split double teams or anchor against double teams or, go through the back door against double teams and get penetration. And then you combine that with the plethora of pass rush moves and the arsenal that he has. But if you put them in the right situation, especially Cansey, like if you can get him into a situation where he's playing on those second and longs or those third down pass rush situations and he's coming through on the interior, like it's a big time like problem for certain teams. And yeah, I really like the edge class, and I think there's a lot of quality there, especially early on, but even some on the back end as well, guys we talked about a bit. Russ, give us some back end guys, some day 3 guys you like at the edge, and then Kendall, I'm going to kick it to you for a question.
Okay.
Russ, who do you like on the day 3 edge guys? We've talked about day 1.
I'm having technical difficulties.
I knew it.
No.
I knew it. I saw the look on his face, and I knew. All right, so let's let him settle with his technical difficulties. Kendall, I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Well, Russ, can you hear us?
Oh, he took out his buds.
He can't hear anything. Yeah, but I didn't know maybe it was coming through the computer.
Yeah, maybe.
This is interesting as he tries to...
We're all riding this roller coaster with him.
Because I don't want to ask you this question, and then we're going deep into it, and then he hears us, and he's back. Can you hear us now, Russ? Still nothing.
No.
Everybody, if you hate Russ and you want things to say about him, feel free. Let us know and come onto the show. Kendall, for you, from a Bills perspective, this is something, we've talked about. Let's talk about this defensive line, not just piggybacking on my point from earlier, but like, I think the defensive line is a sneaky need for the Bills. And I know fans don't want to hear it because it's like, oh, well, they've signed defensive linemen every year and they've drafted so many guys and they can't do it anymore. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't continue to try and improve this group. And I think that the defensive line is a position grouping that needs improvement for this Buffalo Bills unit, not only in 2023, but going forward for the future.
No, I mean, if you look at contracts and how things are set up, I mean, obviously we have Daquan Jones, but I believe, he only has like a year left and then a void year. So is something's going to have to be extended if you
And he's like 31 right now. Next year will be in his
32 right now.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
So that's the thing. It's like Daquan Jones was a pillar of the defensive line last season. And saying that is a lot. And honestly, that should raise your eyebrows at the point we're trying to make. The Bills do need help here. And obviously we talked about Ed Oliver already. He's on his 5th-year option. He's being paid more than Bills fans are probably comfortable paying him, but it's to get that extra year of evaluation. The problem is he plays well this year, that price tag's only going to go up and Bills fans won't want to sign him, kind of similar to the Tremaine Edmonds thing that we just experienced. So it's like we need to both get younger, more productive, and more financially effective on the defensive line as a whole. Like you're paying so much to a guy like Von Miller, you need to cut corners everywhere else that you can. So we're just kind of in that boat where, we're signing smart and responsible free agents as Bean usually does. And guys like Daquan Jones, Jordan Phillips, Shaq Lawson, Tim Settle, responsible signings, guys that will be productive for you in their role, but probably nothing more than that. And I mean, Daquan Jones probably gave you everything you could more than that role. and it was fantastic. But you can't just keep doing that. You need to finally restart the clock financially in that position group, and it's gonna have to start at either edge or IDL. So they got to pick one or the other, and I'm hoping they go IDL. Personally, I hope they go IDL top 2, 3 at minimum. I really want to see it early because yeah, it's a position group that is just a little bit too old. It's a bit overspent on the team, and man, interior pressure really gets to quarterbacks. You can't help those interior offensive linemen like you can help offensive tackles. So if you get pressure up the middle, it really wrecks a game plan.
Very fair. Actually, before we dive into interior defensive linemen, Russ, before you had technical difficulties, which I'm not surprised at because you seem to be cursed every time you come on the show with that.
Yeah, dude, my headphones died, and then I couldn't hear anything through my computer. It doesn't like auto connect. It like just stops.
Got to redo it. Yep.
So we've talked about several round 1 guys for the edge grouping. We talked about some day 2 guys, or potentially like day 2 guys who could creep into round 1. Who are some later, potentially round 3, round 4, maybe even later edge guys who you like upcoming in this draft for one reason or the other?
Well, I mean, I haven't talked about this player a bunch, but that's KJ Henry out of Clemson.
Oh,
I think he's really intriguing. I thought he was somebody that carried himself pretty well as far as like his overall frame. Down at the Senior Bowl, he's 6'4", 250. He's versatile. He ran a 4.64, 4.65, somewhere in there. And he was somebody that just moved really well. And I like guys that are versatile. I don't think he's going to be a guy that comes in and throws up, 15 sacks in a season. But when you can get a guy that comes in and gets you 5 to 6, maybe 7 sacks in a year pretty consistently, and he's versatile and he can move in different spots, I think he's really intriguing. And I thought he was somebody, like I mentioned, I like the kind of, he has some speed to power to his game. He's kind of like a poor man's Miles Murphy in that sense, but he's got really good length. I thought he had a pretty impressive good get off. So I like him quite a bit. Lonnie Phelps out of Kansas was another guy out of the Senior Bowl that hasn't gotten a bunch of hype, but he's 6'2", 245, and he moved well. Like he had a spin move that he was showing off down at the Senior Bowl. He had some explosiveness, and he was able to kind of create separation relatively consistently. And there was even times that he would like long arm an offensive lineman during one-on-ones. So I haven't dove into a bunch of his tape, but just from what I've seen through the Senior Bowl and 2 games through an initial watch, I think he's going to be a day 3 pick. But I'm a little surprised that he just hasn't gotten a little bit more love through this cycle. Like you don't see a lot of film on him. You don't hear a lot of people talking about him. Like when people do their mock draft simulator, you don't see him on there. And again, he's only 6'2". So what is he going to be? Is he going to be an off the ball type backer? Is he just going to be a stand-up edge rusher that has that third down role? Like what is he going to be? And I don't know, but I think those are 2 guys that were really intriguing. And as I think back to my Senior Bowl notes, those were 2 guys that just consistently caught my eye. And then lastly, the guy from Missouri, Isaiah McGuire. I don't know. I don't know what has kind of happened with him. Like he's just like non-existent as far as anything. But when you watch his tape, like there's some consistency there. Like there's some power in his game, really good length. I thought he showed a pretty good motor and some bend. I liked what I saw from him, and I don't understand where there's like just nothing. Like you don't see anything on him. He might be a 6th round pick, but it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up sticking around for a little while and we start talking about him during like those free agency cycles, and he ends up just kind of bouncing around a little bit.
He looks like someone that fits a Bills archetype based on these numbers.
Yeah, right. You see his weight and his
6'4",
height.
268, almost 34-inch arms.
Oh, good.
10-yard split of 1.72. Sounds like a Bills player.
Big guy to compress the pocket without any bend, you say? Like Bills guy. Round 1, round 2.
So you guys didn't answer this in the private chat. Have either of you guys scouted Thomas Incoom from Central Michigan? Because I think he's a Bills fit in a lot of like stylistically. I think he's a Bills fit.
Do tell. Why?
I
haven't watched him.
He's a power rusher. He's like he's 6'2",
Has
like,
no athleticism whatsoever.
no, he's actually athletic. He's 6'2", 263, I think is what he weighed in at the combine. But like he's a power rusher, someone who's strong, heavy-handed at the point of attack, knows how to set the edge against the run, and has a great motor. He's not someone that has like a full pass rush repertoire or anything like that, or real plan, dip, bend, all of that stuff. He's not going to offer you that maybe right away or ever, but he wins in that one-trick pony kind of siloed way, and he does it well. And I think if the Bills are trying to reset the clock on a Boogie Basham type of guy in the 5th, 6th round, much cheaper, he's an option.
I wouldn't be opposed to them jettisoning Boogie Basham into the sun.
Just restart that clock. Get the same player, like 3 rounds less investment.
I want better than that. I don't want the same player. I want better than Boogie Basham.
I mean, it would be more palatable if it's a 6th round pick.
That's fair. I would talk about Caleb Murphy from from Ferris State, but he did not have a good combine. He had a 28.5 inch vertical.
Oh, that's awful.
He had a 4.8 140, and he's only 6'3", 254. But he's one of those guys that's like a D2 player that he set all the records. He had 40 sacks in 2 years. And I mean, Ferris State's a pretty high caliber D2 school, as far as like here in the state of Michigan. And he I don't know. Like, I watched his tape. I thought it was good, but again, I'm watching D2 guys, and like when you're posting a 4.81 and a 29.5 inch vertical, I just don't know. I don't know what to do with that.
That's real limited. Yeah, you're real limited in terms of your upside, and obviously your floor as well. Let's get into the interior now. So we've talked about the edge grouping in several pieces in day 1, day 2, day 3 options. Kendall, I'm going to lead with you because, you kind of mentioned it as we kind of segue to this grouping here. You said you wanted to see interior defensive line addressed in one of the first 2 picks. Who's on your radar? Are you looking towards the first round? And if so, who? If you're looking into the second round, who is it? Like, where's your head at when it comes to interior defensive line in terms of player or skill set, what you're looking for the Bills to add here?
So I'm looking for someone, I guess, more in a 3-tech role. I want someone who's going to disrupt things. So I guess I'm looking more for 3-tech, but someone not with the Ed Oliver size 3-tech, like someone with prototypical like 305-ish weight 3-tech. So the guys that I'm really honed in on in round 2 specifically, and I don't even know if Mazi Smith is going to fall, but he's the first one, and then the second one is Keanu Benton. Those are the 2 that I'm really keying in on for round 2. I honestly don't even know if either of those guys are going to make it to 59. I don't know much about Mazi Smith, but what I have heard and what I have seen highlight wise is that he's a dude that's going to shed blocks. Like, he can get away from blockers, and for whatever reason, productivity has eluded him the same way he eludes blockers. So I don't understand that. But no, I really don't get it, because it's like the Odafe Owe thing where you just see him like dominating, but he has no productivity. And obviously you can talk about his pro career in a different light. But those are the 2 guys I'm highlighting. And then going down the list, 3 guys I'm intrigued with later beyond round 2. Gervon Dexter Sr., Kobe Turner.
Yes, Kobe Turner from Wake Forest. Good call.
Those are the 3 that I haven't watched them, but those are the 3 that they kind of keep popping up in mock drafts for me that I'm most intrigued with. And Zach Pickens is someone that, I mean, I've heard some good things about, but I've also heard he's a little hot and cold.
Yes.
He'll run a little bit hot and cold, but there's a lot of, I mean, I know we don't say scout the helmet, but like there have been a lot of good interior defensive linemen to come out of South Carolina in recent years. So I don't want to just like shy away from that. I think it's a little bit more valuable to scout the helmet in a positive way than a negative way.
Very fair.
I don't know. I think there's more trends there, and you kind of see like how coaching can elevate someone's play versus just saying like Ohio State quarterbacks suck.
No, I mean, I was going to use the Ohio State wide receiver example with everything that Brian
Hartline. Exactly. Yeah. I think in the positive light, it rings a little bit more true than the negative light in terms of scouting.
I think it's fair. I mean, there's a reason certain schools are like, oh, DBU or quarterback U or,
Iowa with defense.
Or I was gonna say, or with like what Oklahoma used to be for offensive linemen, where it just like every year it was like, oh, you can just take one of those Oklahoma linemen, they'll be really good. Or Iowa with offensive linemen, or I don't know, maybe Iowa with tight ends if it's Dallas Clark and George Kittle and Sam Laporta coming up in this draft. Russ, let's kick it to you for some defensive tackle acknowledgement. What do you think about this group? I think obviously, depending on what continues to happen off the field, Jalen Carter isn't going to slip to 27, although I think someone's mock that Warren Sharp posted today that he had the Bills taking Jalen Carter at 27, but that's not going to happen.
No chance.
He's going to be gone. Brazee is going to be gone based on, again, what we're anticipating the board really starting to look like. If we're looking at the interior defensive line, because I do think it is a need for the Buffalo Bills, both in 2023 and beyond. Russ, who do you think is realistically there at the end of the first round? And is there anybody that you like enough to take at the end of the first round with that pick for the Bills?
I would consider Maisie Smith.
Yes.
I don't think he's as raw as some people want to say, but I do like, and Kendall brought up a lot of good points there. He sheds a lot of blocks. He eludes blocks from times. But I think his plan is pretty well developed for a 6'3", 320-pound interior defensive lineman that is got some freakish athletic ability. Now, he didn't do anything at the combine other than the bench, and he put up 34 reps. And it shows. He's got a really good push-pull move. He's got a nice swim move. And I think he's somebody that can fight pressure with pressure and maintain his gaps. And I think when you're just moving him around, whether it's a zero shade, he's aligned as a 3 technique, I think he can do a variety of things for your defense. And I like his skill set. So I would be okay with him. I had him in the first round. I think I had him going to Jacksonville, if I remember correctly, in my mock draft 1.0. Just simply by looking at that team, I think they need some interior defensive line help, and I could see him being a fit. But the further down the board you go, I like Keandre Coburn a little bit out of Texas, really short arms, but he tested relatively decent for a player that's 330 pounds, a lot of power, a lot of experience. I think what you see with him is kind of what you're going to get. He played, close to 50 games in his career, just stout against the run, might only be a 2-down player, but you're talking about a day 3 pick. Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin. You guys know about that at the Senior Bowl. I loved him up. I
ID'd him early. I literally, in my head, anytime anyone remembers Keanu Benton, I literally remember, I forget who we were watching, but we were watching them together, whatever drills. And I just remember Russ literally going, all right, man, I'm going to watch Keanu Benton. And you just walked away from me and went to O-line, D-line. That just sticks in my head.
Yeah, no, there's shades of Kenny Clark to his game at times, I thought. Not saying he's the same player. I mean, he's not as close to being as explosive as Kenny Clark.
Though.
But stylistically, there's times that you see a prototypical 3 technique that has some flashes and glimpses of Clark in his game. But I mean, you're seeing an experienced player that did a really good job creating separation. I thought he exploded well off the snap down at the Senior Bowl and just was consistently in the backfield, consistently making those plays. And when you see that during that week of practice, okay, you know that this guy is really figuring it out, whether it's his pad level, how to, beat double teams, whatever it is. But overall, defensive line class, interior defensive line class, I like it. Mm-hmm. Obviously, a lot depends on what happens with Jalen Carter. I have a hard time believing that he's going to fall out of the top 10. I mean, when you look at what the Chicago Bears are doing with him, they are spending a lot of time trying to figure him out. I think that's the team that is going to end up with him when it's all said and done, if I'm going to be honest. Now, I have heard, potentially Detroit could have some interest there, and it's kind of been Detroit's MO the last couple of years. Penei Sewell fell to them at 7 2 years ago. Aiden Hutchinson was there at 2 last year. There's a chance here Jalen Carter there at 6.
Just keep stacking blue chippers that fall.
Chauncey Gardner-Johnson on a 1-year, $8 million deal. All these guys just keep
biggie. We're built different up here.
On the come up.
Yeah, no, but it's hard winning all these games around here. I'm a born winner.
Detroit all day.
And just with Carter, my thing is I had some text from that pro day, and man, they were not good text. Yeah, it was not good, and it was you heard the reports, and then I got the text, and I was like, no, seriously, are you just doing that for TV, or is that a real thing? No, it was bad, dude. Like, it was bad. Like, they're like trash cans were close by. They thought he was gonna vomit, and like legit 9
He
pounds
couldn't even
overweight.
finish
I have a
drills.
I have a question though. Do you think in the media we're being a little too harsh on him because of this situation and like how he had to take time off to handle real life situations and he couldn't train for his pro day or combine like all of these
That's
guys
fair.
in the draft class are doing? They're all training for those drills for months. And
Yeah, but
obviously it was only like a week or a week and a half off.
But I think it's when you tie it in with like he was
The
out of
character
shape for the
concerns.
semifinal.
Yeah.
Like what's the story that he was out of shape for the semifinal game, didn't get to play a lot of snaps, and so I think like that night or that next day he was like running laps or running miles around campus or something to try and get his conditioning up, and then he came into the national championship game and destroyed everyone because he was in better shape. Like I think it's not if it
It's
was
the
just
context.
correct. And if it was
Okay.
just this one thing, I
Mhm.
wouldn't consider it that bad. But Russ, correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is another breadcrumb in the trail that
Yeah.
is
Okay.
concerning if you are
No, that's
Jalen
fair
Carter.
then. I had to ask though.
No, and I think the thing too is, and like my initial research on him back in December or whatever it was, because like the initial national media report of character stuff was like early December. And
Yeah.
I started like digging into like the player, reading articles, reaching out, finding things out, had a charity, was giving back to community, was feeding a teammate on the
Oh, that's
team.
right.
So he didn't, and I'm like, okay, maybe this is just one of those got blown out of proportion. And then all this other stuff starting to happen. And then you see the pro day and you're like, man, like what's going on? And like, absolutely, I'm with you as far as like, we are kind of being harsh on a young
Mhm.
kid that, yeah, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, making the bad decision. But at the same time, you are a grown ass man. You
Yeah.
are an adult. Like 18 years old, you got to step up and be a man. Like just because you're in college doesn't mean you're some kid. You are now getting paid millions of dollars to play this game in college. And like my thing is like if I do something stupid, I lose my job, I lose my house. Nobody, like I'm just a normal member of society. He should be treated the same way I would get treated if I was in that position. And I'm maybe being a little too harsh on that, but like
I
that's
get
the
the
reality,
perspective.
bro.
No, I get it.
And I think the big thing is like we go back 2-3 years. We look at what happened to Henry Ruggs. Like nobody wants that to happen again because that could very well happen if this is the way Jalen Carter acts off the field. And like for me, I don't got to worry about my dude during the season. I got to worry about him, the 7-8
Yeah.
months where he's not in season.
And that's what's concerning. And I think like even with the not being able to train properly with everything that was going on, like to not be able to finish your pro day drills is really bad. Like, cause it's not even just like, oh, well, he performed and it just wasn't great. Like, not only was it not great, like he couldn't finish. Like he was like petering out mid drill. Like he
Yeah.
just couldn't finish the drills and was like that. I mean, again, you're a bigger guy, but how do you get that out of shape that you just can't complete drills like that?
Well, like even when he was hitting the bags, it was bad. Like there was
Yeah,
no power or
no,
conviction,
like everything. And,
nothing.
and and maybe it's so again with everything that's going on off the field, maybe everything that was happening mentally really sapped everything for
Yeah.
him. And again, maybe it manifested on the field. But if we're talking from what you get from him when he's on, I mean, he's arguably the best player in this entire class.
Right.
Like, as far as blue chip prospects in this class, it's Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, and Bijan Robinson for me individually.
Yeah.
And again, if he was there at 27, I'd take him. Granted, you got to do all your offseason or off the field work and investigatory things.
Hmm.
But this defensive tackle class, like I do like, you guys both mentioned him. I really like Mozzie Smith, like from Michigan. He plays so low. You can tell he's got like a heavier lower half and he uses that to anchor himself into the ground. Like he's got strength and power from that lower body. He's physical and powerful versus the run. He can torque offensive linemen like he's an offensive lineman. He can literally take guys and just straight turn them and torque them and get them out of his way. He can play that center shade. He can line up his one tech. They've lined him up as a 3, a 4-eye as well. He doesn't have a ton of pass rush pop. He has a long arm, which he uses when he wins from a pass rush perspective. It's with power and extension, but he can use that to his advantage because he has such a high motor and a quick get off. So he'll get under an offensive lineman and drive and push. He's got a couple reps in that Ohio State game where he's just beating up the interior, and like a center who I really like in Luke Whippler, and he's just abusing Luke Whippler and the right guard on back-to-back plays and back-to-back drives. He can be a little 50-50 in his double teams versus the run, but I just think he needs a little more anchoring and technique there, which I think can happen. Good quickness for his size. I really like Mazi Smith. You guys talked about Keanu Benton. He's one of my second round dudes. I mean, when you're like 6'4", 310 pounds roughly, and you can line up as a 3 tech, a 2, a 1 tech, or a 0, and you have that, your hands are that active and you have that quickness and you can penetrate, but also hold up at the point of attack. Like, it's extremely intriguing, like you guys mentioned. Siaki Ika is just one that is still super intriguing to me because he's listed at 6'3", 335 pounds. And you would think like he would play heavier than he is. But I watched the tape and I was not in a complete way, not in a super negative way, I should say, because I set the bar high. I assumed he would be more of like a run stopper, point of attack, holding guy because of his weight. He was less of that and more athletic and nimble on his feet than I anticipated. Like, he's pulling off spin moves and getting into the backfield. Like, he's got a quick get off. He uses his hands well. He's another one who doesn't have a ton of pass rush moves from the interior, and he could anchor better versus double teams, but he can go through a dude. I think a lot of people are going to compare him to Vita Vea, but he is not that. He gets moved a little bit too easily for his size for me, but I think that's because he's lighter on his feet, both positively and negatively. Like, he's agile, he's got good feet, he's quick, he's nimble. And when things work for him, they really work. When he gets under somebody and drives, it's over in the blink of an eye versus the run in the pass. Like, there's a lot of depth there in this position grouping early on. And then Kendall, you mentioned someone who I really like as a day 3 guy, or who maybe might be creeping in. I really like Kobe Turner from Wake
Tell
Forest.
me about him. What do I need to know?
He battles on
he keeps showing up on my mock drafts. He's
for
there.
me, Kendall, you've heard me say this before. Like, I like dudes that have some raptor to him, and he's got some raptor to him. Like, he makes linemen work on every single rep. Scheme versatile. He can line up in a 3, a 4, a 4-eye, and a 5. Quick get off, active hands. His form and his technique need cleaning up, but he's out there causing havoc on like every rep. It's not the prettiest thing at times, but he's just violent. He's quick. Again, he's got like raptor in him, and he just battles.
So the motor runs hot.
Yes. And you add high motor with violence. Yeah. And I think that's a fun combination. Yeah. Someone who I also like, but I think he's more probably a day 2 guy, late day 2. The other Texas defensive tackle, Maru Oromo, from Texas, smaller, more in that Kalijah Cansey type mold, listed at 6'3", 292 pounds, but he's quick. He can anchor against a double team a bit. He'll drop that knee and split the double team. He's got active hands. He's kind of like a bigger Kalijah Cansey, and played on a fast, nasty Texas defense. He's somebody who, again, I think adds to the depth of the interior class here for this draft. I think the defensive line, it's a strong class overall. In this draft class for what you get on the interior and on the outside on the edge. And for a team like the Bills, who could use high-end talent here in addition to depth, versatility, and a variety of tools and skill set, I think it's a position grouping that is super intriguing.
I have another name, by the way.
Do it. Throw that
I have to. I'm sorry. Dante Stills out of West Virginia.
Ooh, I've actually scouted him. I have a report on him.
Don't lie, Kendall.
No, it's one of the few.
What'd you think of him?
I don't know what to think about him with the Bills. I had him as a 5 tech. He was tough to scout because of obviously the way West Virginia used him. I'd have to pull up the report specifically, but I felt like he was somewhat underwhelming in terms of production, but I felt like he always found himself like he was always fighting. He was always sufficiently there doing his job. It just never felt like he was doing anything more than that.
Yeah.
I think that's like the quick way to wrap it.
Yeah, no, he's not going to be a guy that gets you like, a ton of sacks, but he might get you 2 to 3, maybe 4 here or there in a season. But like, he's intriguing to me, even though he's 6'3", 286, He ran relatively well at the combine, like for an interior defensive lineman. You mentioned a 5 technique, I think like 4-eye 5. He's going
Yeah,
to play in
something
that range. But his dad played 10 years in the NFL. He played like 130 games in the NFL. He was drafted by the Chiefs, played for the Ravens. So like I think he kind of has an NFL bloodline. And when you look at like day 3 type pick, I think this is a type of guy that might end up becoming not a plug and play guy, but really a key rotational piece. Like I think Kansas City Chiefs, they have so many day 3 picks. It's stupid.
Yeah.
Dante Stills is going to go there, play in the same probably locker as his dad, play 7 years, win 2 Super Bowls, and just, go around the league after that. But he's going to be one that we look back and be like,
God.
Him
learning from Chris Jones is a nightmare. Right. I would not want that happening as a Bills fan. I'm looking at my scouting report right now. My highest traits for him are motor, shed ability, and hand use. Mm-hmm. Apparently, I really liked his hand usage.
You sound like you doubt.
This was the first scouting report I wrote of the season, so it was a while ago. This was like back in November.
Very fair. Nice name for us to end on here. I think this is the longest episode, not including draft episodes. This is the longest episode of Disguise Coverage I think I have ever done.
I think that's back to back for me on you. Like doing this, we've gone 2 hours back to back times.
No, I don't think we did 2 last time.
I think we did.
We were like hour 50 something. Hour 50.
Russ is like, no, I'm pretty sure I know.
No, but I mean like officially hitting the 2 hour mark. I feel like is different. Like if you're rounding up, that's a different story.
I sincerely apologize for derailing the natural flow of things here. I will take ownership for that.
Oh, you're good, dude. It was fun.
No, this was a great time. I was gonna say,
it was really nice to talk to you guys again.
No, I mean not really for us to talk to you, but
I shouldn't have done it.
Feeling is not mutual.
Like I appreciate where you're coming from, but it's nah.
But like, please leave.
Yeah, but please. I should have just dropped you out as I said that. I'm like, okay, thanks, goodbye. No, this was absolutely tremendous. I think this is a conversation that's going to continue, like here on this show, and as we move forward, like, and especially too if the Bills sign different players and how other teams sign other players, draft boards will shift, needs will shift, that'll shift targets and who potentially becomes available and who doesn't become available. So I thought this episode was tremendously important, and I was pumped to have Russ, you on for the show, especially in your debut week, being that draft analyst for Fantasy Pro. So it was cool to get you. Stop clapping, Kendall. You're such a suck up. So it was cool to have you on the show and be able to kind of put you forward in that light for the awesome work that you do. And Kendall, yeah, it was awesome to have you back. You've been such a busy dude with moving to LA and getting that new job and everything that you've done. So it was nice that you were able to stop by in the comments and then call us cowards and challenge us to send you the link, which we did. And here you are. So this was a nice, again, originally what I had planned. And then I think it turned out, pretty awesome too, that you were able to jump on. So Kendall, thank you very much. Russ, thank you very much. All you folks in the live chat, thank you very much for riding with us. I can't believe we still have this many people at 11:13 East Coast time in over 2 hours. Everybody who rode with us live on this episode, thank you so much for doing so. If you still have not dropped a like on this video, please, 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 and thank you. Drop a like on this video. Whether you're watching live or watching later, again, it goes a long way towards helping us and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes. So again, thank you very much for anybody who dropped a like. Thank you very much for those of you who rode live with us. If you didn't ride live with us and you're watching later, listening later on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, whatever have you, thank you very much for your view, your listen, your download. If you are listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage on that platform. Ratings and reviews are super helpful in addition to the subscription. So those are greatly appreciated. If you are here on YouTube, please subscribe to the Disguise Coverage channel. That is also greatly appreciated. Again, whatever way you consume this episode, we appreciate the hell out of you for it. Thank you again to Mr. Russell Brown, Mr. Kendall Mursky. Appreciate all the folks who are giving us kind words in the chat right now. Thank you very much for that. Shout out to the sponsor again, One Pie Pizza, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, hands down. I got 2 pies of it for some family this past Saturday, and it was awesome. Like we got like the regular pie and then like a veggie pie with some pepperoni, and they take all the peppers and the onions, and like some pizza spots will just like put them kind of like whole and lazily. they dice them all up like in
Eh.
perfect small increments and then like sprinkle it all on the pizza. So every bite you get an even amount of taste and consistency. And that's on top of the sweet sauce pie, cup of char pepperoni, homemade blue cheese. Like they are the best in Buffalo when it comes to pizza. Get yourself some one pie pizza. This has been a decent marathon of an episode, but I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was chock full of tidbits and details and scouting and evidence, although I am probably kind of biased. Again, if you enjoyed this episode, drop a like here on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube, rate and review and subscribe on the podcasting apps or platforms. Please, 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 and thank you. Tell your family and friends and loved ones about the show and how awesome it is. Turn them onto it. If you thought the show was terrible because Kendall kind of invaded it and Kendall's awful,
just blame it on me.
Just blame it on Kendall. Tell your family.
Drop into my mentions.
Exactly. Stalk him. Try and find things in his background that you can use to figure out where he lives. Egg his house. Just attack him in whatever way, shape, or form. And then tell your enemies about this show if you want to try and ruin their day. It's a good time. I'm sleepy. Thank you very much to everybody who tuned in live or post live, whatever have you. Thank you.
I just went to war.
Right. Thank you to Russ. Thank you to Kendall. For myself, Anthony Prohaska, for Kendall Mirsky, for Russell Brown. This has been another episode of Disguise Coverage. Hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well, staying safe, be kind to one another, take care of one another. I will see you next week. And as always,